Taiwan to St. Kitts and Nevis, Her Excellency Fiona Fan, Ambassador of the Republic of China, Taiwan to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Mr. Francisco Bencosme, Senior Policy Advisor of the USAID, Mr. Mervyn Farrow, Regional Representative of the Eastern and Southern Caribbean of the USAID, Mr. Guillaume Simon, Acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of External Affairs, International Trade, Civil Aviation and Diaspora Affairs, Dr. Marjorie Jameson Charles, Principal of the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College, members of the Diplomatic Corps, members of the media, online viewers, good morning. My name is Tracy Pilgrim George, and it is my pleasure to welcome you all to the 2023 Global Cooperation and Training Framework Literacy Forum, a platform dedicated to addressing one of the most pressing challenges of our time: building democratic resilience against disinformation and misinformation. Two words that just have one letter difference, but a tremendous difference: disinformation and misinformation. We are honored to have each and every one of you here in person as well as online for this crucial conversation that transcends borders, ideologies, and disciplines. Over the course of this forum, we have the privilege to have distinguished speakers and experts in person and online who will share their insights, experiences, and expertise on the challenges surrounding disinformation and misinformation. Through keynote speeches and insightful panel discussions, we aim to deepen our understanding of the issues at hand and explore effective strategies for fostering democratic resilience in the face of information threats. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. It is a pleasure to also see our students from the Sir Arthur Lewis Community College. I welcome you as well. And at this point in time, I would like to welcome His Excellency Ambassador Peter Chen, Ambassador for the Republic of China, Taiwan to St. Lucia, with some opening remarks.
Honorable Acting Prime Minister Sean Edward, Honorable Avina Reynolds, President of the Senate, Her Excellency Linda Taylor, Ambassador of the U.S. to Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean, and the OECS, Ms. Barbara Feinstein, Deputy Assistant Secretary of U.S. Department of State, Mr. Francisco Bencosme, Senior Policy Advisor of the USAID, Mr. Mervyn Farrow, Regional Representative of the Eastern and Southern Caribbean of the USAID, my colleagues, Ambassador Michael Lin from St. Kitts and Nevis, and my colleagues Fiona Fan from St. Vincent, Ambassador Fiona Fan from St. Vincent and Grenadines, Mr. Guillaume Simon, Acting Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of External Affairs, International Trade, Civil Aviation, and Diaspora Affairs, members of the Diplomatic Corps, all the participants, viewers online, friends of media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's my great honor to welcome every one of you to the Global Cooperation and Training Framework, GCTF, Media Literacy Forum. On behalf of Taiwan, I'm delighted to implement and co-host the GCTF affiliated event with the government of St. Lucia and the U.S. Embassy in Barbados, the second year in a row. I would like to express my sincere appreciation to all speakers from St. Lucia, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and Grenadines, United States, Japan, and Taiwan to attend the forum. I also like to take this chance to thank colleagues from the Ministry of External Affairs, International Trade, Civil Aviation, and Diaspora Affairs of St. Lucia, and the U.S. Embassy in Barbados for your efforts to make this forum possible. In the digital age, disinformation and misinformation can spread like wildfire, even faster than the truth can catch up. It undermines public trust, distorts public discourse, and can even pose serious threat to democracy and social cohesion. As we navigate an era of information overload, it is imperative that we equip ourselves with the tools and know-how necessary to tear apart truth from falsehood. Take Taiwan as an example. Taiwan is suffering over 100 million cyber attacks every year. Taiwan is also one of the biggest targets of disinformation and fake news, largely disseminated by the Chinese Communist Party. China spreads fake news and manipulates opinion polls during Taiwan elections, and it even spreads disinformation about COVID-19 to discredit the government of Taiwan. Therefore, Taiwan has developed some know-how on how to identify and monitor the manipulation of fake news over the past decades. I believe our two Taiwanese speakers will share it with all participants later. As in the Latin American and Caribbean region, social media, especially TikTok and WhatsApp, becomes increasingly the information provider during elections. The spread of fake news on social media influences how viewers think about elections. Since democratic countries in this region started to look for ways to combat this and misinformation, we believe media literacy programs are the most effective long-term tool against the dissemination of fake news. We look forward to hearing our esteemed keynote speakers and panelists in sharing their expertise, experiences, and innovative approaches to counter disinformation and misinformation. Further, I encourage all the participants to bring back some new tools and ideas to your organization, schools, and even family. We can work together to enhance media literacy and develop strategies to counter the spread of fake news or fake information in the society and around the Caribbean and Latin American region. Thank you again for being here, and let us embark on the journey to counter fake news and protect our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador Chen. The GCTF has without doubt given Taiwan the opportunity to leverage their strengths to address global issues through training programs in several countries, and we are very grateful for this partnership. Pop quiz. I am invited to a party, and I have been given the information. The party begins at 8 o'clock. In all of my rush, I call my friends and say to them, the party's at 9. Don't forget the party's at 9. Was that disinformation or misinformation? What is the difference? Misinformation or disinformation? Did I deliberately mislead my friends, or in all of my haste, I made a mistake? We'll find out later on today. We now invite with some remarks Her Excellency Ambassador Linda Tagliatella, tongue twister, Ambassador for the United States to Barbados, the Eastern Caribbean, and the OECS, with some remarks.
Good morning. Protocol having been established, I will begin. First, Ambassador Chen, thank you for your thoughtful remarks and for Taiwan's continued partnership with the United States, which we deeply value. I am delighted to be here today as we demonstrate our shared commitment to building collective democratic resilience through bolstering media literacy. In an age where communication flows freely and swiftly across countless media platforms, our societies are inundated with an unprecedented amount of information, much of which is unverified, biased, or intentionally misleading. Misinformation and disinformation have become insidious threats to the foundations of our democratic institutions and the well-being of individuals. It is in this context that we recognize the critical importance of strengthening media literacy. Media literacy, in its essence, is the ability to access, evaluate, and create media content while disconcerting fact from fiction and identifying biases. This skill set is necessary for individuals to empower themselves to be critical thinkers and active participants in civil society. Likewise, the consequence of failing to prioritize media literacy is dire. Misinformation, I'm going to give the answer. Misinformation, which is often spread unintentionally, can sow confusion, breed mistrust, and erode the fabric of societies. Disinformation, on the other hand, is the deliberate weapon designed to manipulate and deceive with the potential to disrupt elections, incite violence, and damage social cohesion. Strengthening media literacy is our best defense against these corrosive influences. It is crucial to recognize that misinformation and disinformation are not limited to any ideology, political affiliation, or geographic location. These growing phenomena transcend all borders, affecting each and every one of us. To safeguard our communities and countries, we must make media literacy skills accessible to all, which is in part why we're here today. Educational institutions play a pivotal role in this endeavor. Community organizations, NGOs, and governmental agencies must also collaborate to promote media literacy initiatives. Media organizations themselves bear a profound responsibility in this matter, as do the individual citizens. Today, we'll hear from experts about the role of different institutions on this issue. The importance of bolstering media literacy cannot be overstated. It is an essential step in preserving our democratic values, protecting our social cohesion, and empowering individuals to make informed decisions. Media literacy is not a luxury. It is a vital skill for the 21st century, and we must commit to its promotion and integrity in all of our landscapes, including education, public sectors, social, and technology. As we continue this endeavor, let us remember that it is our duty to work together in the spirit of partnership to safeguard the integrity of our democracies and the well-being of our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Disinformation, misinformation. One letter sets it apart, and I hope by the end of today we can really make that distinction. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to invite the Acting Prime Minister, Honorable Sean Edward. We extend a warm welcome to you, sir, with some remarks.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Yesterday I received a call informing that I would be the first speaker here this morning. And having listened to the chair, I am beginning to wonder, am I a victim of misinformation or was that disinformation? Permit me to adopt a truncated version of the established protocol by acknowledging the presence of the Senate President, the Honorable Alvina Reynolds, Ambassador of the United States Ambassador to Barbados, the OECS, and the Eastern Caribbean, Linda Tagliatella, Ambassador Peter Chen, Taiwan's Ambassador to St. Lucia, other ambassadors and diplomats of the diplomatic community, and I noticed a parliamentary colleague in the person of the Honorable Bradley Felix has just walked in. And of course, I must acknowledge my cabinet and parliamentary colleague, Minister for Commerce, Parliamentary Representative for Soufrière, the Honorable Emma Hippolyte. On behalf of our Honorable Prime Minister, the Honorable Philippe J. Pierre, let me express our government's appreciation of this invitation to deliver remarks at the opening of this very important and timely event entitled Building Democratic Resilience Against Disinformation and Misinformation. The very nature of the subject itself underscores its importance and timeliness. As a result of misinformation and disinformation, our democracy is under threat. How do we safeguard our democracy from misinformation and disinformation? The question is, how must this be accomplished? We all have agreed in our quiet moments that misinformation and disinformation can adversely affect the operations of any society. The answer to this question is the reason for this forum and the reason why the event is so important here at Sandals this morning. Of course, the answer is not easy. It is not simple because the methods utilized by the forces of disinformation are varied and complex and are incessant. They are relentless, the peddlers of misinformation and disinformation. Despite this, let me share some thoughts on some strategies that can be employed. 72 years ago, in October of 1951, St. Lucians voted in a general election in which for the very first time, the only qualification to be an elector was that one had to reach the age of 21. The previous qualifications of the possession of a certain amount of property, income, and literacy, the ability to read and write your name, had been discontinued. If literacy was discarded as a requirement to vote 70 odd years ago in St. Lucia, ironically, it is even more desirable today for our electorate to be very literate in a manner that will give them the knowledge and understanding of the intricacies of the technology that dominates the distribution of information. They must possess a literacy which makes them appreciate how misinformation and disinformation can be spread. We must give them the tools to be discerning. And you will agree with me that given the prevalence of technology and easy access to information or disinformation or misinformation, it can be a challenge to decipher wrong from right, what is authentic, what is credible, and what is fake. We must give our people an education that teaches them critical thinking and to help them develop their critical thinking skills. Just as importantly, it is imperative that our people are taught to hold steadfastly to traditional and time-proven concepts about truth. The truth is based on facts, and facts are events that can be proven to have happened, proven to be correct, that can be tested, and that cannot be disputed or refuted. That is why truth can never be what you believe it to be. In other words, truth cannot be subjective. If honest governments are to combat disinformation and lies and build resilience for their democracies, they must constantly inform their people of government's policies and make them understand these policies at their levels. Transparency must be a watchword in governance and government moving forward. In the world today, where every citizen with a phone, a camera, is a journalist, and where digital technology and social media are constant sources of information, disinformation and misinformation, the facts of government policies must be relayed and disseminated just as constantly and incessantly. In other words, if peddlers of misinformation and disinformation are active 24 hours a day, spewing their rhetoric, presenting the fake news, it is incumbent on government and state agencies to be just as robust in countering the misinformation and the disinformation. The message of truth must be played over and over again.
For the media practitioners, those who gather and disseminate news, and who have been styled the fourth estate as the guardians of democracy, it is more incumbent on them than ever before to take their profession and their mission seriously and to ensure that their news is based on fact and is the truth. And I know there is the temptation in mainstream media to put stories out there because they sell. In 2023, news is not only a platform to feed facts and truth, but for many, there's an economic benefit that can be derived. And so if a story is sensational, you put it out there, and at times not paying as much attention to accuracy and facts as you ought to. You only have the responsibility and the solemn duty to let the public know when misinformation and lies are being paraded as truth. The preservation of democracy, of its principles and values, is therefore the responsibility of all of us who believe in good governance, who believe that the interests of our public are best served by those who hold the truth dear and believe it to be fundamental to the proper functioning and development of our societies. Let me therefore once again commend the organizers of this forum for the initiative, and let me wish you a successful stay in St. Lucia for those of you who are visiting our shores, be it for the first time or whether you've been here before. We sell our country as a tourist destination, and there are many facets and dimensions to our tourism product. We boast of being the world's leading honeymoon destination. And for those of you who are coming from overseas and you're not yet married, this is something to consider. I don't want to be specific in terms of the pronouncements I can make about the establishment that is hosting us today, but I'm sure being here at Sandals, you will profit the opportunity to engage the staff, and of course, I'm sure there's something you can find to take back with you. This forum today, as I indicated earlier, is very timely, and we live in the information era. The cell phone has become one of the most powerful tools at the disposal of mankind. There was a time when you were told that an individual has in his possession a firearm, and you would have been treading very cautiously not to offend this person. But trust me, history is replete with examples where cell phones and other like devices have proven to be even more destructive than what a firearm can unleash on an individual, on the people, on a society. So we have to constantly, as policymakers, as persons who sit in the upper echelons of state agencies and the government itself, to safeguard our people from misinformation and disinformation. That has been used in times as a strategic tool to create mayhem and to distort government operations and to just create panic in the society. And there's a desired effect that peddlers of misinformation and disinformation look out for when they embark on their mischief. So, as subtle as an initiative it is coming across to being, I think the importance of today's event cannot be overemphasized in the context of where we are at today, and more so for us as a small island developing state of St. Lucia. And I notice there are a few other Caribbean countries that are represented here today, and I'm sure their interest in such an activity is just as important as ours. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you so much. In St. Lucia, we have two political parties, the St. Lucia Labour Party and the United Workers' Party. And of course, we have some, smaller parties on the side. In my family, we are, and supporters of both parties are very, very passionate. So I've got one faction of my family that are Labour's for life, SLP supporters. The other side of the family, UWP, Flubbo for life. I've got two small children. We often have family dinners. When I take them to one side of the family, they get a lot of information. Disinformation, misinformation, I just know when I get back into the vehicle, I've got to just reprogram them. When I go to the Flubbo side of the family, they get all of this information. Misinformation, disinformation. Bring them back to the vehicle and say, you've got to look at both sides of the coin, because they're both right and they're both wrong. But you've got to have all the information to make informed decisions. So yes, Honorable Minister, it is incumbent of governments to share factual information all of the time and everywhere, because they need that information on TikTok, they need that information on Instagram, they need it all over to reach the young people so that they can make informed decisions. At this point in time, I would like to welcome our ministers, ambassadors, senators, Miss Barbara Feinstein and Mr. Francisco Ben Cosme, to come to the front for a photo op. Please welcome forward all ambassadors, ministers, senators to the front at the bottom. Yes. Now transitioning to another segment of our program, I am delighted to announce the commencement of the keynote speeches, and this morning we have two of them. The first will be delivered by His Excellency Lo Ping Cheng. His Excellency Lo Ping Cheng, Minister without portfolio, is a distinguished individual with a rich background in law and public service. With a career spanning over 2 decades as an attorney at law, Lo Ping-cheng demonstrated a commitment to justice. Notably, from 2012 to 2017, he served as the chairperson of the Taiwan Innocence Project, contributing significantly to the pursuit of fairness and integrity within the legal system. His passion for legal education is evident through his role as a lecturer at the College of Law, National Taiwan University from 2014 to 2017. During the same period, he also chaired the Legal Aid Foundation, further solidifying his dedication to providing legal assistance to those in need. In 2017, Lo Ping-cheng assumed the position of Minister without Portfolio for the Executive Yuan, where he continues to contribute his expertise to various governmental initiatives. Additionally, he took on the role of spokesperson for the Executive Yuan from 2021 to 2023, showcasing his commitment to transparent and effective communication within the government. Lo Ping-cheng's multifaceted career reflects a steadfast commitment to legal excellence and justice. Please direct your attention to the screen for a recorded message from His Excellency Ping-cheng Lo, Minister without Portfolio, the Republic of China, Taiwan.
在场的贵宾、各位女士、各位先生，大家早安。我是中华民国台湾行政院政务委员罗秉成。首先，十分感谢主办单位我国驻圣露西亚大使馆、美国驻巴贝多大使馆跟圣露西亚政府共同举办全球合作及训练架构 GCTF。这次的主题是建立民主韧性，抵御恶假讯息的海外研习营。本人感到非常荣幸，能够获邀出席参加这次的活动，跟各位民主伙伴共同讨论我们台湾面临假讯息跟认知作战的威胁与挑战，还有分享台湾如何反制的做法跟经验。在俄乌战争之前，西方民主国家比较重视和防范的是俄国用假讯息来干预民主制度，扰乱自由的言论环境。俄乌战争爆发之后，更验证了被称为无烟硝战争的资讯战。俄罗斯是如何在战争前常年的准备，透过有组织、有系统的恶假讯息散布，企图来弱化乃至动摇乌克兰人民对政府、还有西方民主国家以及民主制度的信心，为俄罗斯后来发动的实体战争铺路。乌俄战争同时也让国际社会警觉到，中国同样借由假讯息、认知作战，扩大威权主义，尤其是中国借由乌俄战争配合俄国的行为跟说法，不断在国际上散布跟俄罗斯几乎一样的假讯息，包括中国在战前便开始散布打击乌克兰的言论，透过大外宣加强散布支持普丁的相关影片，附和俄罗斯将战争责任归咎于美国跟北约等等。事实上，中国在更早之前就已经学习了俄罗斯进行假讯息攻击跟认知作战，还把台湾视为最重要的实验场域。早在2014年俄罗斯并吞克里米亚后，中国除了仿效俄罗斯的手法外，并发布关于推动传统媒体和新兴媒体融合发展的指导意见，确立了新媒体宣传的政治任务，结合了中国社群舆情监控的优势，发展出具有中国特色的手法态样，并透过舆情监测系统掌握台湾民众的关注焦点，也运用了媒体、自媒体、异常的账号、网络水军、在地协力者，这比如网红、特定的政党人士等等的方式，来对台湾持续展开散布假讯息的认知作战。 台湾研究假讯息问题及中国影响力的民间智库台湾民主实验室，他们在今年3月发布的中国影响力指数。这个研究计划发现，中国除了会透过操控媒体和学术来干预他国的意识形态，也会透过跟其他国家在经济跟技术的紧密合作，建立依赖的关系，并迫使其他国家接受跟中国相同的外交政策目标，联合举行军事演习等。这些的手段的目标，都是在打造一种与西方法治社会背道而驰的中国模式。中国影响力的这个研究结果也发现，台湾在调查的82个国家中，中国影响力指数排名为第11名，但是在社会跟媒体这2个领域，台湾的被影响程度则为全球排名第1。另外，根据瑞典哥登堡大学的研究计划指出，在调查的179个国家中，台湾遭受外国假讯息攻击程度，从2013年以来到现在已经连续9年了，都是世界第1，处在中国威权主义扩张的最前线，也是中国发动假讯息认知作战最重要的试验场域。台湾社会跟政府开始意识到这个问题的严重性是在2018年，当时包括使用2007年的旧照片制造香蕉丰收导致价格崩盘的假讯息，还有蔡英文总统到台湾中南部视察淹水的灾情的时候，搭装甲车下令士兵可以随时射击将人民当成敌人的，都是假讯息。这个目的就是为了要降低民众对执政党的支持，甚至进而造成同年年底地方选举受到严重的冲击。从2018年到现在，台湾受到的假讯息的攻击从未减少，不是仅逢选举期间才被攻击而已。对台湾人民来说，面对假讯息的攻击已经是日常生活的一部分，而且我们发现假讯息内容的样态也不断在演化，更与阴谋论及混合型的资讯操控交相作用，令人穷于应付。跟着我们台湾的台湾事实查核中心今年刚发布的研究，有关台湾民众对假讯息认知的情形，调查结果显示，假讯息散布的情形仍然非常严重。今年有高达83%的台湾民众在最近的1年有收到假讯息，绝大多数的台湾民众都认为假讯息对社会的影响严重，其中有认为非常严重的有35%，严重的有67%。中国常年对台湾进行认知作战，借由放大中国的好，扩大台湾政府的缺失，来达到加深分裂、分化对立、改变偏好、认同一中的政治目的，以及裂解台湾百姓的信任，挑拨社会的和谐，扰乱施政的节奏，破坏友盟的关系等等的战略意图。中国的终极目标在形塑对台军事行动的有利态势。而在俄罗斯入侵乌克兰后，以及去年和今年中国对台军演期间，我们发现中国越来越频繁在台湾操作以美论、毁台论、金援外交这些阴谋论述。例如，在去年的乌俄战争爆发初期，中国运用曾经受过国台办训练的网红，散布中国协助持台胞证的台湾人撤侨的假讯息，这就是借由民众对乌俄战争的恐惧来打击对台湾政府的信心。而去年8月间，美国众议院议长裴洛西访台后，中国对台湾进行军演，我们的国防部密集监测军演期间中国对台湾散布的假讯息，并统计搜整总共有272件之多。这中间的内容包含营造武力统一台湾的氛围，打击政府防卫能力的威信，扰乱军民士气等。去年中国对台湾军演期间散布的假讯息跟认知作战的情形，我们发现这些攻击并没有随着军演的结束而停止，而内容也越来越多，状况是质疑台湾的军事能力、国防政策、外交作为等，把我们提升国防自主、 军事能力和民主外交扭曲解读是台海冲突的挑衅者。另外，许多时候这些假讯息并非只是针对错误可受查证的事实，而是掺杂许多的阴谋论，营造反对或质疑美国及西方民主国家挺台措施的氛围。这意图削弱台湾民众对于台湾维护主权的决心，以及炒作战争和和平、形塑两岸兵凶战危的氛围。比如近期我们台湾赖副总统出访邦交国巴拉圭，过境美国的时候，中国便利用一次性的异常账号散布台湾执政党金援巴拉圭、金门士兵叛逃这些假讯息。2018年台湾的地方选举，来自中国的假讯息攻击非常严重，因此台湾政府开始透过跨部会、跨领域的合作，我们制定了一系列的防治假讯息的政策来因应预防。我们也不断累积个案的经验，持续调整防治假讯息的因应策略。台湾政府是在2018年组成跨部会的防治假讯息专案小组，在同一年，我们也提出反制假讯息的相关政策还有修法，分别从释假，也就是媒体识读；破假，也就是政府澄清假讯息；发展第三方独立的事实查核组织；议假，也就是监理媒体落实查证选举、罢免、公投、广告透明化；惩假，也就是处罚要件明确化、责任化，这4个面向来推动。而这4个面向中，释假、破假是我们所强调最优先的作为，采取公司部门的跨领域、政府部门跨部会的合作策略来防止假讯息。在释假的面向，除了政府部门主责媒体识读教育训练外，平台业者跟公民团体也有相关的合作计划。根据台湾事实查核中心今年的最新研究，有关台湾民众是否需要透过教育或宣传来加强民众对于辨识假讯息的能力，我们有高达94%的民众认为需要，只有5.8% 认为不需要。释假的工作必须持续长期的做，只有培养民众的媒体识读，才能让社会有足够抵抗假讯息的免疫力。而破假是澄清假讯息的工作，以快、对、准的目标。在政府方面，我们透过政府发言人系统的整合，建立跨部会平台，及时掌握并回应需要澄清的假讯息。这是整个政府跨部会的工作。只要假讯息的内容涉及政府部会，都必须及时、主动、正确地向民众澄清。另一方面，我们要指出，公民社会团体在破假的工作也扮演相当重要的角色。近年来，台湾有许多民间团体成立独立的、不受政府指导或介入的第三方事实查核组织，已经逐渐形成稳定可信的生态系。另外，跨国平台业者也必须一起合作破假。假讯息是当今许多民主国家都遇到的难题，但观察国际上并没有一个最佳的解决良方，也没有一帖见效的万灵药。因此，我们更应该注意到国际合作的重要性，比如相互分享针对俄国和中国发动假讯息手法的研究分析，对民众的沟通策略等等。此外，中国近来不断模仿俄国手法对台散布以美论，或是在国际社会上不断混淆一中政策跟一中原则，借此来营造对于台湾在国际地位的错误认知。我们希望西方民主国家能够认知这个严重性，并和台湾站在同一个阵线，共同重视破假、反击假讯息的作为。未来台湾政府会持续努力，期盼能以民主、人权的普世价值作为和各个民主国家伙伴关系沟通的基础，持续推动反制假讯息、认知作战的战略联盟，确保民主制度的永续长存。谢谢各位的聆听，相信今天接下来的讨论跟交流，能更进一步巩固防御假讯息的国际民主阵线，也祝福大家身体健康，活动圆满成功。谢谢大家。
public sector for debunking misinformation immediately, and the importance of educating our people on how to decipher between disinformation and real information. Our second keynote address will be delivered by Mr. Francisco Ben Cosme. Mr. Ben Cosme serves as the Senior Policy Advisor for China Policy at the United States Agency for International Development, USAID, where he advises the administrator on matters concerning the People's Republic of China and Taiwan. Prior to joining USAID, Francisco played a pivotal role as deputy of the Special Presidential Envoy for Compact of Free Association negotiations, contributing to the conclusion of 3 20-year compact agreements in the Pacific Islands. In addition to his current role, Francisco previously held positions such as Senior Advisor to Assistant Secretary for East Asia and the Pacific Affairs, where he provided guidance on strategic planning, speech writing, democracy, human rights, and other cross-cutting issues. He has also contributed significantly to human rights policy and advocacy in Asia and Latin America during his tenure at the Open Society Foundations. Francisco's diverse background includes service as a professional staff member of the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee, where he assisted Democratic senators on East Asia, Pacific, South Asia, and State Department USAID oversight. Recognized for his advocacy work, Francisco was named one of the Hill's top 2018 lobbyists. A Council on Foreign Relations term member, Truman Security Fellow, Penn Kemble Fellow, and an International Career Advancement Program alum, Francisco earned his Master of Science in Foreign Service from Georgetown University, a graduate certificate from the USAF Air University, and his BA from Wake Forest University. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Francisco Ben Cosme. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here with you today at the Global Cooperation and Training Framework meeting to share the U.S. government's perspective on our vision for the responsible use of digital technology to build democratic resilience against disinformation and misinformation. I want to thank our co-hosts for inviting me today, U.S. Ambassador Tagliatella, Ambassador Chien, and Prime Minister Edward, and other St. Lucian government officials. This morning, I would like to walk you through key points of our U.S. digital strategy, the corrosive effect of information manipulation, and the steps we can take in the Caribbean and around the globe to address this issue. Building on decades of leadership in digital development, USAID's digital strategy outlines deliberate and holistic commitment to strengthen open, inclusive, and secure digital ecosystem to each country in which we work, including St. Lucia and other nations in the Eastern and Southern Caribbean. Digital ecosystems, the stakeholders, systems, and enabling environments that together empower people and communities to use digital technology to gain access to services, engage with each other, or pursue economic accountability and transparency in governance, introduce new and innovative health education services, and make development and humanitarian assistance more effective and efficient. Yet these benefits are not without their accompanying risks. Digital transformation also comes with the risk of increasing advanced divisive messaging, crime, and illicit finance. Despite the global prevalence of mobile phones and the internet, the reality in many communities does not yet reflect the potential of a digital ecosystem that drives sustainable and equitable growth. Vulnerable or marginalized groups often find themselves excluded from the digital ecosystem because of inadequate infrastructure or a lack of affordable or relevant products, services, and content. Access can also be limited because of political, social, or environmental or economic factors. Amidst these digital opportunities, we face a pervasive problem of information manipulation, a serious threat that undermines confidence in our institutions and governance. Information manipulation poses a significant threat to democratic values and the promotion of rights and governance. Censorship, threats to the internet and digital freedoms, political divides, and the struggles of modern journalism also contribute to this problem. These issues limit access to factual information and enable information manipulation to flourish. According to the Freedom on the Net 2023 report published by Freedom House, as information and manipulation has spread, internet freedom has decreased for 13 consecutive years. Elections often serve as a flashpoint for digital repression. Moreover, oppressive regimes are now using advanced technology to monitor their population and suppress free expression, bolstering their own power. Reports show a high number of arrests for online expression, which aids authoritarian leaders in spreading disinformation more broadly and can have a chilling effect on those who dissent, including sometimes independent media. This exploitation of digital platform is a serious assault on civil liberties and democratic principles. These hurdles pave the way for the rise or intensification of information manipulation by hindering access to reliable facts and data in our communities. You'll notice I used the phrase information manipulation, and we talked a lot about nomenclature this morning, but it's an important distinction. We use information manipulation as it is inclusive of disinformation and misinformation practices, but also the use of propaganda and malinformation, which is part of the authoritarian playbook and includes half-truths, selective facts, or stolen information to undermine democratic resilience or for political aims. Information manipulation is a tactic often used on the international stage. Authoritarians and political figures use it to sway opinions, gain global influence, using a mix of censorship, intimidation, incentives, and propaganda to dominate the information space and extend its influence across the globe. Beyond state actors, we also observe the proliferation of disinformation in alt media spaces, like certain message boards, conspiracy news sites, and gaming sites. These spaces let users share and confirm their own views separate from mainstream media. This populist expertise can sometimes influence mainstream channels, which may inadvertently amplify misleading information due to a lack of understanding of these alternative platforms. Not enough organizations and experts are focusing on these alt media spaces, which is a problem because it can undermine efforts to combat information manipulation. As we consider these broader challenges, we must also turn our attention to more sophisticated threats that are emerging on the horizon. Deep fakes and artificial intelligence or AI-generated propaganda create highly realistic videos and audios altering facts, faces, and voices to make it seem like people are saying or doing things they never did. In the past, the rush to flood the internet with false news and comments often led to mistakes that reveal their fake nature. But AI is getting better at mimicking human writing without these errors, making it harder to detect and trace disinformation campaigns. This means we could be facing a future where spotting false content becomes significantly more difficult and further diminishes trust in online content. So what are some emerging solutions that we can apply in combating information manipulation? At USAID, we take a keen interest in this area and use research and analysis to inform our programs. For example, USAID's Promoting Information Integrity and Resilience Initiative, or PRO-INFO for short, aims to help address information manipulation through diplomatic engagement, donor coordination, capacity building efforts in countries where it's needed the most, ensuring that everyone has access to trusted information. In combating disinformation, civil society and the media play a crucial role, though their efforts are supported and underappreciated oftentimes. To address these multifaceted challenges, experts like Dr. Joan Donovan, formerly director and lead researcher of the Technology and Social Change Research Project at the Shorenstein Center at the Harvard Kennedy School, suggest a three-pronged approach known as the 3Ds: detect, document, and debunk. Applying this 3D strategy requires critical thinking and tech-savvy skills to be able to learn to discern or detect the veracity of information and assess whether content has been manipulated and identify potential misinformation and disinformation before they spread widely. Once potential disinformation is detected, it's crucial to document it. This means collecting evidence, preserving the content, such as taking screenshots or saving links, and recording its source on how it's being disseminated. The documentation process creates a record that can be used to understand the tactics, reach, and impact of disinformation campaigns. It also provides a basis for accountability and legal actions where appropriate. The final step involves actively countering the disinformation with facts. Debunking false narratives is done through fact-checking and providing accurate information. It's essential that the debunking is done clearly and promptly to prevent the false information from taking hold in public perception. This 3D approach is a comprehensive method that only addresses symptoms by debunking falsehoods, but also tackles the root cause by improving the information ecosystem. It provides a robust response to disinformation, yet is only part of a larger ecosystem of solutions, which includes supporting pillars of truth, supporting local journalism and civil society. Bolstering local journalism is key to countering and preventing disinformation. Local newspapers hold their governments accountable and have a robust, positive effect on political participation. Studies by the UN and the International Center for Journalists note that support for quality journalism and independent media is a major force for identifying and exposing disinformation. Civil society organizations can emphasize the importance of media literacy and education. These initiatives aim to teach people how to navigate, analyze, and discern media content, fostering the ability to distinguish between high-quality information and disinformation. In the digital age, civil society organizations are championing the cause of digital literacy and security to help online communities spot and fight against disinformation. Digital literacy isn't just about the media, it's about learning to navigate the online world. Understanding how to find, check, and create content on digital platforms, it's also about interpreting the digital landscape smartly. Moreover, digital security is crucial. It's about protecting our personal information and identities online to keep us safe from becoming targets of misinformation. Take the Digital Society Project as an example. It's all about giving us the lowdown on how politics plays out on social media, covering everything from censorship to fake news. Our efforts to combat information manipulation often focuses on protecting elections and strengthening media. However, we must not overlook supporting other groups like small businesses and micro entrepreneurs who are increasingly hurt by these false narratives. These entrepreneurs can be tricked by fake websites and scared away from using digital financial tools. They also face hurdles in accessing credible information on government aid or loans, leading to distrust in digital opportunities. For those working with minimal profit margins, the impact of misinformation can be catastrophic. It's clear that our investment in building resilience shouldn't just be in democracy and governance, but also in equipping all sectors, the economic ones, to withstand the challenges posed by information manipulation. It is with this backdrop of democratic backsliding and information resilience being weakened globally that it is so prescient to be here today and learn from Taiwan's model. The United States maintains a deep appreciation for Taiwan's vibrant democracy, its respect for fundamental freedoms, and strong commitment to the rule of law. Its efforts to create an enabling environment for engaged civil society and transparent and accountable approach to governance ensures its peoples can build a society that is more resilient and prosperous. In conclusion, the United States and Taiwan's commitment to fostering open, inclusive, and secure digital ecosystem is more critical now than ever. As global partners in this framework, it's incumbent upon all of us to support initiatives like the 3D strategy, promoting media literacy and ensuring digital security. By empowering local journalists, civil society, and even small businesses, we can build a resilient democratic fabric that withstands the threat posed by digital manipulation. There's a lot to unpack and discuss on this topic, and I look forward to a lively exchange of views from our distinguished panelists today. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ben Cosme, for highlighting the threats to our democracies and providing some ways that these threats can be combated. Now, he mentioned 3 Ds, but I wasn't typing fast enough, so I was only able to get the last D. You know, there's this, you can always remember the things that were said last or the things that were said first, but everything gets lost in the middle. What was the first D? Detect. We've got to detect. The second was? Document. And then finally it was? Debunk. The 3 Ds. And with Taiwan leading the charge, we know that we are in good hands. No? Do we agree? We agree. So thank you so much to the government of Taiwan for leading the charge to make sure that we get good information and this disinformation can be combated. Let's transition from the keynote speeches to our panel discussions. Panel 1 for today, learn how to identify misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, and fake news. The first panelist this morning is Ms. Summer Chen. Ms. Chen is the editor-in-chief of Taiwan Fact Check Center. Fact Check Center. Taiwan Fact Check Center, TFC, is the first fact-checking organization collaborating with Facebook, Yahoo, and Line in the Chinese-speaking world since 2018. Due to the political geolocation, TFC also serves as a frontline defense against Chinese information warfare. In addition to debunking misinformation, disinformation, TFC also built the dense line in Taiwanese society through media literacy projects. Before being a fact checker, she was a journalist for a daily economic newspaper. She started to be a fact checker in May 2019. She leads the TFC team to fight several battles against misinformation and disinformation. TFC won the Best Corrected Award of Global Fact 7 and was an initiative of the Coronavirus Facts Alliance in 2020. TFC fought against the disinformation during the China military exercise in August 2022. Now she is leading the team to combat misinformation and disinformation ahead of the 2024 presidential election. She loves to be part of the fact-checking community. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Chin, who will be coming in live.
I'm the chief editor of Taiwan Fact Check Center, and I need the access to share my screen. Before start my panel, I'm pretty worried about the time is so tight. I can't introduce all what I want to share. However, after Ambassador Linda explained what is misinformation and the disinformation, and also Mr. Francisco has already given us a lot of insights and the 3D ideas, so I can pretty focus what's going on in Taiwan and what's our strategy about debunking and the media literacy. So, and thank you for introducing me. And I think, first of all, I want to talk about the challenge we have. The most challenge now is Russia and China play together and spread and do the conduct the information operation. So I would like to emphasize, because for China, he has already controlled the media and and also control the social media. So when he has a very strong control to do the censorship, and the people will do the self-regulation. So the only resource and the information we will have is from the state-run media, and most of them are propaganda. And at that status, the disinformation is just a very small part of it. So we can imagine in China and for Hong Kong, for Xinjiang, all the media was controlled. So the only resource and the only information is from state-run media. So most of them are propaganda. And China didn't need to use the disinformation to attack the society. However, Taiwan is another story. Taiwan is a democracy society, so China will use different strategy and will play different trick toward Taiwan. And the second challenge is what we have is not only the cheap fake. The cheap fake is the disinformer use edited photo or unrelated footage to fabricate an exist incident. However, now the deepfake and the AI generated, the technology gets very low price, and the technology will make the disinformation and the most misinformation is more real. So let's have a very quick quiz and to see if you can guess is AI generated or it's real events, real news. So the first challenge is in a high school in China. There is a high school. A lot of drinks was placed on the ground. Do you think it's an AI generated photo? Actually, it's true. It's a true. It's a real news. This high school, the building was collapsed, and many students get injured and even dead. So people just bring a drink in memory of them, and the numbers of days is tabooed, and people are allowed to talk about that. And how about these photos? Do you think it's real or not? The Obama and Macron have the fun time together. And actually, it's AI. It's AI generated photo. And this is quiz 3. And it's the claim says there is a father in Gaza. He is holding his kids, and all the kids was sick and get injured. The father looked pretty sad. And actually, it's AI. So if you see the details like the fingers, the hands, and the toes, they are unnatural and weird. We can prove that it's AI-generated photo. And how about these insects? It's AI or it's real? And actually, it's real. Although actually it's a real insect, and the wings has a smiling face, but it's real. Next one is a cheese bus. Think it's real or AI generated photo? It's kind of like art. However, it's AI generated photo. So after those quiz, we can understand it's so difficult for us to tell it's AI generated or it's real. It's a real photo. So you can so now you can feel how what's the challenge that for journalists, for fact checkers, and even for you to tell those kind of footage or images go spreading on social media. How do you tell it's real or it's AI generated? So it's so a big challenge for us. And so until now, how do we debug? How do we counter the misinformation and the disinformation? It tends to be all of us need to build the media literacy, the sense of media literacy. It's not only the fact checker's job, but all of us need to build that. So the strategy for us is build a defensive line with the audience. So the audience is the frontier of fact checkers. When they receive the message, we will tell all the audience if the message get you upset, anxious, or too excited. Those kind of information is called suspicious information. Please share to us. So we have in Taiwan, we have lots of chatbots for debunking, and the TFC provide our fact checks as a database for all the chatbots. So let's see how our chatbots work. Teach our audience to add our chatbot into their line. So when they receive a claim, they can share what they feel anxious or angry. They have some emotion. That's called a suspicious claim. So they need to share to us. We encourage them to share to us. And our database will do the matching and share our fact checks to the audience immediately. So the audience can share to their relatives too. So imagine that if people has those debugging chatbots, then he can build very close connection with us, and he can share the claims he have to us, and also we can send back our fact checks. So we tend to build a very strong defensive line in our society. And so what we do is we collect the claims from the audience, and we do the verification, we do the interview, we interview the experts, and we verify the documents, and we do what we need to do independently. And also we won't take the news later from government as regarded. We do the verification by ourselves on our own, and then we publish our fact checks and share to the social media, to the fact-checking community, and also the media, mainstream media too. And the second strategy we have is we do the pre-bunking, and also we empower the journalists. So we will learn, we use a lot of verification tools and skills, and after we have more skills, we share to the journalists. So we host the workshop to journalists. And during this year, because we are worried the journalist will be the target that disinformers spreading misleading information to the journalist, and the journalist need to do the fact check. So we has already hosted 2 workshops to Taiwanese media. And also, we will do the pre-bunking. Before the election, we will teach our audience what the disinformation will be during the election, before the election day, and at the voting day, and after the election. We predict what kind of disinformation we will have, and by providing our audience the playbook, we hope our audience has just like the vaccine, Fox vaccine. And the third strategy we have is we do a lot media literacy program, enhance democratic resilience. TFC get 1 million grant from Google.org, and we have already run the project the media literacy project in the past 2.5 years, and half of the results goes to community college. So there are 28 community college run the media literacy program, and the C teacher is from different fields. So you can see the yoga teachers, and the herb teacher, the saxophone teachers, and the mobile phone teachers, or teachers teaching the community, the elders people in the community, the housewife in the community. They are from different fields. However, they will teach the media literacy and the critical thinking at the same time. So it's a pretty fun project and pretty meaningful. So for us, it's not only a media literacy program, but also those teachers has already build very close relationship with those students for many years. So it's also build a very important trust circles in our society. So when the malicious disinformation comes, then anyone can ask help from those trust circle. And also we do a lot of workshops to high school teachers and the college teachers, and also we host the youth debunking challenge for the high school students and the college students. So we also build a good training circle. We train the trainer, and the teacher will bring into the campus and encourage the more students to do fact checking. So when everyone, the youth generation, learn how to do the fact checking, and they also have the critical thinking. They will have the strong media literacy capability to defense disinformation. So that's what we do. We want to build we want everyone has the critical thinking and for the stronger democracy society. So our strategy 4 is connecting with global fact-checking community. So we are under IFCN, it's International Fact-Checking Network. So there are almost 100 fact-checking organizations. Until now, we have already 2 global collaboration projects. One is Coronavirus Facts Alliance. It's initiated by TFC. And also the second one is Ukraine Facts. There are around 100 fact-checking organizations work together to debunk the misinformation and the disinformation about the war. And also, I really want to introduce under IFCN in the regional, the Latin Queens Network is there are 40 fact-checking organization from Latin American, and they were meeting together and help each other and share the information to each other and give them up each other. So I really recommend if your country has fact-checking organization, they can participate the Latin fact-checking network. Okay, so thank you for your listening.
A very interesting presentation, and it is definitely heartwarming to know that there are so many organizations around the world that are fact-checking, because sometimes it feels that we're just overwhelmed with all of this disinformation and misinformation. We thoroughly enjoyed the AI quiz. How many of you passed that quiz? Let's be honest. Only one person passed that quiz? 2, some of the students? Well, yes, Ms. Chin?
Yeah, I hope that quiz can make you so impressed. And so after the meeting, everyone will learn how to do the debugging.
Thank you so much for that. The second panelist is Ms. Emily De La Buya. Emily is a co-founder of Horizon Advisory, a geopolitical consultancy, and a senior fellow at the Washington, D.C.-based Foundation for Defense of Democracies. She has led extensive China research programs and developed novel analysis tools and techniques. She received her BA summa cum laude from Princeton University and her MA summa cum laude from Sciences Po Paris, where she was the Michel David Weil Fellow. Her public commentaries have been published in Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal, and TechCrunch. Ladies and gentlemen, our second panelist this morning is Ms. Emily De La Buya.
Thank you. Thank you for having me and for your attention to this really very serious issue. I'm going to be relatively quick in my remarks, but a thing I want to focus on is the role of disinformation or misinformation, and also combating it not only in the social media or the more personal day-to-day space, but also when it comes to commercial or even government level interactions, like the bigger picture, more strategic, if you will, elements of international and private sector interactions, and then individuals' understanding of them, reporting on them, and generally monitoring of trends in those fields. Most of my time, I run a research advisory firm where what we do is we leverage publicly available and commercially available information to answer questions that range from understanding who it is who's behind a given transaction or a given investment or a given news story, to the more strategic level of what does that mean and what are the risks incumbent with it being that entity or that network or that program that's the associated one. And the thing we come across on a regular basis is that as much as the disinformation, misinformation campaign is critical when it comes to propaganda, to news, to social media, it's also really, really critical to understand in the international, commercial, and strategic landscape. The basic premise, though, of what we do is that even though this is a grave risk and a really serious danger, and one that becomes more and more aggravated as we just discussed, information technology tools and information proliferate, there are also benefits in today's information environment in that they entail a plethora of data and a plethora of sources that can be used to pierce through the haze and to make less opaque the business, the commercial, the information environment. And that's the kind of sources that we use and we comb through, and also we try to create on a daily basis. And also what I want to talk to today. So really the importance of combating and piercing through dis and misinformation in the commercial and the business and the government and the strategic landscapes, but also the value of open source information in responding to them. So an example of what I'm talking about to make this a little bit more concrete might be that, yes, you read a news story, right? And what is that news story saying? Is it accurate? Where is it coming from? What's the bias of the entity that's advancing it? That's like a really, really important question that part of the 3Ds and that is very much in the conversation about mis and disinformation. But there's also, if you have a potential transaction, who are you actually transacting with? What are they offering and what are their motives and how might those be skewed? That's just as much a critical question to answer and to use rigorous data and analysis to address. And it holds at the high level too. If you're a government or you're a company and you need a component for critical infrastructure, as a software platform, what have you, you want to know A, what you're being offered, but B, who's offering it, what their motives might be, and what the risks incumbent in accepting that investment or that good are. And if you're, say, media reporting on these kinds of transactions, it's just as important or perhaps more important for you to do that work, for you to do that due diligence, so you can surface risks that might not be appreciated on the part of the impacted players, whether those are consumers or society generally, or on the part of actually the entities engaged in the transaction. So that's the kind of value in commercial, open source, publicly available, and commercially available data in answering these kinds of information questions regarding how the environment might be skewed. The next question, of course, is how that information can be available and how it can be used. And again, I want to be relatively brief on these remarks. I know that there are a number of other expert panelists and potentially even time for conversation afterwards. But so in interest of haste, what I'm going to do is just quickly run through a couple of different types of sources and where those are available and how we in our in-company process use that different taxonomy to make sure that we're doing our due diligence. And a first source, needless to say, is government databases, whether those are domestic government databases, those of other potential entities involved in this transaction, or, for example, U.S. ones that might cover global actors that are involved in the global data, in the global marketplace. So for commercial data, we'll go to the U.S. SEC database, but also if, for example, we're looking at a Chinese entity, Chinese corporate registry databases that are going to have owners and affiliates of an entity. And anytime we go to any of these, the next beat is that it's critical not only to look at a first level, but also to look beyond that, really to trace the networks of actors involved in any given thing. The same way for a news story, you would check not only the outlet that runs the story, but also who initially published it. And really to go to the very, trace back to the very beginning. And that's kind of those kinds of databases are the higher level that gives you at least bird's eye view of what type of an entity you're dealing with, what types of entities it's involved with, and how they fit into the information landscape. Throughout this process, I'd also stress that a lack of information is can be as valuable as information itself. If you're dealing with an entity and there's nothing published on it in the open source, that in its own right is a risk. Because it's rare to have that, and it may suggest that there's some amount of obfuscating involved. And then the next beat is like more synthetic or longer form or deeper dive type analysis in the formal ecosystem. Increasingly in today's environment, especially if you're dealing with bigger, well-known commercial actors or risk actors, there have been in-depth works done on them or on their partners or counterparts, whether that's by think tanks or academics or other commercial entities. And even just simply going into a search engine, looking for either the name of an entity involved or a known partner, but keeping an eye out for how they might figure in synthetic analyses. Okay, I know my company, we publish consistent reports on, our focus is on China, but on Chinese tech players, and just on understanding who they are, what their priorities are, who they're connected to. And so, if you look for us and you look for any Chinese state-owned enterprise, for the most part, we'll probably have written on them in the open source. And the same goes for any number of other players like us who are doing this kind of work. And then finally, third in this taxonomy of players is less formal, but still equally important sources. So this is somewhere where social media, for example, can actually be used to check disinformation in the commercial space. Often if there are, you can find red flags in social media and also more traditional media because many of the players dealt with in this kind of situation are relatively well established and have been relatively documented. And running searches like that, all those three kinds of searches in parallel. So the more informal discourse, more formal discourse, and then more empirical or more quantitative or high level or regulatory type information. Those three in parallel can be used, albeit with in-depth exploration, to create a more nuanced picture of the information space, including as pertains to commercial, business, other market-oriented dynamics, where there might be a real interest in obfuscation and real risks at the individual and at the strategic level associated with that. So that's, in short, just a very high-level overview of this other element of the dis and misinformation risk, and the kind of open source resources and approaches that taken together can be used to address it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you for that. Thank you. A round of applause, of course. Thank you for taking the time, of course, for sharing the value of open sources to combat dis and misinformation in the commercial space and where to find those sources. We look forward to a continued discourse when we have our question and answer segment. Our third panelist is Mr. Leroy Williams. Mr. Williams is a graduate of the University of the West Indies, Mona and Cave Hill campuses. He holds a bachelor's degree in theology with first-class honors from Mona campus, a postgraduate diploma in education with specialization in the teaching of English with distinction from Cave Hill campus, and has undertaken training in several areas of journalism. Upon graduation from the University of the West Indies, Mr. Williams has held several jobs, including senior writer for St. Kitts Nevis Observer newspaper and journalist reporter for several media establishments in the Federation, including SKN Vibes. He lectured at the Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College in the Faculty of Arts, Sciences, and General Sciences, and the Faculty of Technical, Vocational, Educational, and Management Studies, where he taught 8 courses over 5 years, which include Communication Studies, Caribbean Studies, Ethics and Citizenship, Caribbean Politics and Society, and Critical Thinking. He has served for 6 years as Assistant Examiner for the Caribbean Examinations Council for Caribbean Studies. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Leroy Williams.
A pleasant good morning to all from the beautiful island of St. Kitts. Can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Wonderful. Okay, so before we can approach the topic of learning to identify misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, and fake news, it is important that we define the key terms. I know that, some of these were mentioned earlier, but I will go over them. Misinformation basically is a mistaken understanding that is spread unintentionally. In other words, it's wrong information, which is not true. Disinformation is false and misleading information that is maliciously spread. So that is the difference between both. One is unintentional and the other is intentional and malicious. Propaganda, on the other hand, is information, especially of a biased or misleading nature. It is used to promote or publicize a particular political cause or point of view. Fake news, which is a term that is very, very recent, and we hear it in the false stories that appear to be news or information that is clearly and demonstrably fabricated and that has been packaged and distributed to appear as legitimate news. Topic: building democratic resilience against disinformation and misinformation. And looking at the importance of identifying misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, and fake news. Any true and sincere democracy values freedom of expression. According to the Constitution of the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis in Chapter 2, Protection of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, Section 12, it is said that except with his own consent, a person shall not be hindered in the enjoyment of his freedom of expression, including freedom to hold opinions without interference, freedom to receive ideas and information without interference, freedom to communicate ideas and information without interference, whether information is to the public generally or to any person or class of persons, and freedom from interference with his correspondence. It then can be said that freedom of expression is a right enjoyed by the public in a democratic society. But what about the responsibility that comes with it? The purveyors of misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, and fake news are taking this right and abusing it to meet their own ends, purposes, and objectives. The Nobel Prize winner, Joseph E. Stiglitz, underscored the link between information and public good when he said, information is a public good, and as a public good, it needs public support, and good information is necessary for the functioning of a strong democratic state. The COVID-19 pandemic unleashed an infodemic, overwhelming us with an excess of COVID-19 content, especially in relation to mis- and disinformation. We know too well that differentiating fact from fiction can be challenging at times. Sometimes, even trusted people may share baseless information. It is the responsibility of a media professional to counter mis- and disinformation through accurate, evidence-based reporting. Given the challenge we face today, especially in an age of social media and other online platforms, which are super spreaders, they have fueled mis- and disinformation, propaganda, and fake news. It is now important more than ever to identify sources, disentangle the messages with which we are engaging, and discern quality information and reliable facts from falsehoods and manipulation. This is an arduous task. I think we will all agree. How do we do this? It is important to listen. Monitor social and traditional media to understand how, where, when, and why misinformation, disinformation spreads in the community. We have to check the sources. We have to verify the source of the information. Is it a reputable news outlet or a known propaganda site? Is the source evidence-based? Do experts support the information? Look for supporting evidence. Check if the information is supported by other credible sources. If the information is not supported by any other source, most likely it may be false. We have to check the author. Verify the author's credentials. Are they an expert in the field? Do they have a history of publishing credible information? We have to check the date as well. Verify the date of publication. Is the information outdated or has it been updated recently? We have to check biases. We have to be aware of our own biases as journalists and how they may affect our perception of the information, and try to approach information objectively. We have to use fact-checking tools. And there are some, such as Snopes, factcheck.org, and PolitiFact, to verify the accuracy of the information. We have to be skeptical. Be skeptical of sensational headlines and clickbait. If something seems to be too good or bad to be true, then it probably is. And as journalists, when we identify misinformation and disinformation, we have to write powerfully. We have to use our listening and research skills as journalists to craft community-focused stories that engage with our audience. We have to meet people where they are in terms of trust in issues. We have to provide factual information about the issue. We have to be aware of common concerns and questions and acknowledge them in our stories before correcting misperceptions. And we have to write stories about the fact that some people don't trust the particular issue or thing. And some of the good ways to the credible example that defies the false claim. We have to cite expert sources that counter the false claim. And we have to shed light on where the false information originates. It is a task indeed. Misconception, misinformation as misinformation and disinformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Williams, for clearly outlining the steps that we must take to verify information and the role of journalists. It is indeed a task. So thank you so much for your presentation. Our fourth panelist is Professor Michael Wagner. Professor Wagner is a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Madison's School of Journalism and Mass Communication. He is a passionate scholar, educator, and service-oriented individual, focused on the core question: how well does democracy work? His research spans political communication, parties, journal public opinion, psychology, religion, the presidency, and biology. He is the recipient of multiple teaching awards, including the Madison Teaching and Learning Excellence Fellowship. His extensive publication record is reputable in significant research projects. Professor Wagner explores mass policy preferences, Wisconsin's media ecology, and leads the Communication Efforts Lab. Wagner earned a Bachelor of Journalism from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and a PhD in Political Science from Indiana University in 2006. Professor Wagner enjoys family time, music, golf, kayaking, and passionately supports Wisconsin sports team. Yay! Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Wagner.
Thank you so much. I am very delighted to have the chance to speak with you all today. I will spend some time talking with you about some topics that have been covered well by some of our other panelists, and then moving on to some other topics that I hope are of good use to you. And I would like to thank the political leaders, ambassadors, staff members, and other public servants who've done such a great job putting this wonderful event together. Now, we are all very familiar with the telephone game, a game that children often play where someone begins sharing a message, and as that message gets privately shared between children, sometimes the message ends up becoming quite different. And sometimes it could be because someone is saying something wrong on purpose, spreading disinformation, knowing that they're saying something that is not true, hoping to sow some chaos, while others sometimes will just get the information wrong and honestly share incorrect information. And both of these behaviors can have detrimental effects on what people believe to be true and how they subsequently engage in different sorts of political and civic behaviors. The consequences of mis and disinformation are strong. One study from the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins University finds that just with respect to misinformation about the COVID-19 vaccines, that misinformation can cost up to $350 million per day in the United States alone, with healthcare costs that come from people believing in mis and disinformation. Not only are there economic costs, there are costs of scale, as things that are not true tend to spread much faster through our information ecology than things that are true. To give you an example of how misinformation spreads, I want to talk about something that happened back in the United States in 2016. The way that misinformation often spreads in a viral fashion on social media begins with the use of what we might call a kernel of truth. So most misinformation has some elements of the claim that are true. So for example, this tweet right after then President-elect Trump won the 2016 election, he traveled to Austin, Texas to give a speech. And a person on Twitter who had only 40 followers at the time, tweeted these photographs saying anti-Trump protesters in Austin today. That part was true. There were anti-Trump protesters in Austin, Texas. The rest of the claim is false. Here are the buses they came in. These protests are not organic. And so it takes a kernel of truth and then adds some emotional language. They're anti-Trump here, and they're fake protests, as the hashtag says. It makes an exciting claim. These protesters aren't organic. They were bussed in. and it links to some kind of evidence. Here are photographs of buses. And so it adds credibility to this message, and it's psychologically comforting. Those who prefer Donald Trump to Hillary Clinton in 2016 are comforted by the fact that people who don't like Donald Trump must have been paid to be there, must have been bussed in, could not possibly be real. And so this tweet originates with a small number of followers and gets tweeted retweeted tens of thousands of times. And as it gets retweeted, ideological news media begin to pick up the claim. And you see now we've moved from the claim that the buses aren't as organic as they seem to claims that say they found the buses, which now suggests we knew this was going to happen all along. And we finally located these buses of these phony protesters, when in fact, of course, that ended up not being true. But the claim is that we found them. Here are the photographs. You can see that on the Free Republic website, more than 300,000 people shared the link to this claim. And as that ideological media picked it up, political elites themselves started sharing the claim. Even then President-elect Trump, who tweeted out shortly thereafter, professional protesters incited by the media are protesting. Of course, once again, this wasn't true, but you see at the time we captured the screenshot of this tweet, over 200,000 people had shared President-elect Trump's message. Then, once it was said by a political elite, it spread like wildfire across the information ecology in national sources like USA Today, in more right-wing sources like the Gateway Pundit, and in local sources at ABC, NBC, and Fox News affiliates all across the country. And so this one claim from a person with 40 followers was seen by tens of millions of people over the course of a day or two. And it turned out the claim was false. Those buses were taking people at a Tableau conference, which is a tool for kind of database management. A lot of accountants use it. It was a Tableau conference that were busing people from one hotel to another. Most of those people had no idea that Donald Trump was even in Texas that day and were not a part of any of the protests that were taking place with respect to then President-elect Trump's speech. To his credit, the person who tweeted the original message does post, as you can see here, that he had taken down his original post. It was, and that it wasn't true. He in fact said it was false. But you might notice 70 people liked that post as compared to the tens of thousands who liked that before. And so this is an example of how a particular kind of claim can flow through the information ecology. I also want to talk about how this operates at scale. And so in work that we do, the University of Wisconsin and the Center for Communication Civic Renewal, we've been identifying networks of what we call low-quality information. It may be that people are sharing things that are true, but it turns out that what we look at is when people share things that are not yet verified. And then, of course, many claims that are not yet verified do turn out to be untrue. And in the case of this particular example, that's exactly what happened. And so there were some claims on social media platforms that the COVID-19 vaccine causes infertility, which it does not. And it really originated with 7 red dots that you can see here. 7 people started making this claim, and only 5 people actually reshared that information in the first few days that the claim was out. But those 12 people spread the information to a network of 2,000. A few days later, a bunch of other people began tweeting that same disinformation, and now 13,500 people were seeing these false claims. A week after that, it was up to 35,000 people seeing these false claims. And then a couple days after that, it was 49,000 people seeing false claims. And again, it's only 131 people actively seeking to sow some kind of chaos by sharing something that's not true and doing so intentionally. But the effect is much, much larger across networks, across social media. One tool that we have, and we've heard from some wonderful panelists already talking about this, is the use of fact-check journalism to try to combat these claims. Do fact checks work? Do they actually lead people to believe things that end up being verifiably true? It turns out that in work we've conducted, there's different kinds of attitudes we have about claims of truth, and there's differential amounts of confidence that we have in those claims. So, for example, we might ask somebody, here's a claim that a political leader has made. Do you think it's true? And they'll tell us yes or no. And we'll look at the fact checks that have been conducted about that claim, and we'll know whether that person was right. But then we'll also ask them a follow-up question. How sure are you that you are right? And so when someone gets the answer to the question right and is sure, that's a person that we call informed. When a person gets the answer wrong, so they get the claim of fact incorrect, but they're still sure, we call them misinformed. When people guess right, but they say, I'm not really sure, we call them ambiguously informed. So they might have guessed the right answer because it's a yes or no option, but then they'll say, oh gosh, I really didn't know. And then there are other people who say, I don't know. These are people that we call uninformed. And it turns out that when you show fact checks to the uninformed, they do very well at beginning to learn the verifiable truth. Unfortunately, the misinformed, the people who were both wrong and certain, are not people who tend to benefit from a fact check. There are also some unintended consequences of fact checks, the most relevant of which is that even when a fact check is successful, in other words, even when the presentation of verifiably accurate information persuades someone to believe that verifiably accurate information, people then become more likely to perceive that that journalistic outlet is expressing some kind of bias. And so there might be a long-term consequence to effective fact-checking. It may be that even though trustworthy information is being transparently shared, it erodes trust in news organizations over time, as many individuals think that journalists actively taking a side about the truth is an example of bias, when in fact it's an example of the purpose of journalism, which is to share the verifiable truth. So, what other strategies might be available to help combat mis and disinformation flowing throughout the globe? One strategy is one that we've landed on called observed correction. And so many people, when they might share something on social media or in conversation that isn't true, and then get corrected on their social media feed or in conversation, tend to react pretty negatively to that kind of correction. And so we tend not to have success trying to correct someone who's making an errant claim themselves or making a claim about something that's not true. But if other people see that correction, those folks, those who observe the correction happening, tend to be extraordinarily likely to be persuaded to come to believe the verifiable truth. And so observed correction is a strategy that can work at scale to combat the spread of low quality or mis or disinformation. What's really nice about observed correction is that it works across a variety of issues that members of our team have conducted over the past 7 years about the Zika virus, fluoride, genetically modified foods, raw milk, COVID vaccine, all show that when people observe corrections on social media that also link to the verifiably true information, people become less likely to have misperceptions about those issues. And the effect size, in other words, how big that effect is relatively consistent across different kinds of issues. The way that we want to make this happen at scale is to leverage social media companies' advertising platforms. So we're not trying to engage in any content moderation. We don't have anything to do with how social media companies share information that isn't true. What we want to do is say, we have a sense of who the networks are that are seeing low quality information. We want to buy ads and share verifiably true fact checks from IFCN verified sources and show people other evidence. And then hopefully they can look at that evidence, weigh it against the other things they've seen in social media, and decide for themselves what's true. And what we find is that even when we say this is an advertisement, even when we say the ad is this post is promoted, even if we say it was produced by a bot account, people tend to trust the information if it's presented by a reputable fact checker and includes a link to the accurate information. So as we think about going forward, we saw that a small number of bad actors can have enormous effects on attitudes and behaviors, and disinformers themselves are not really very likely to be persuaded to stop their chaos making. But other people, the people who see the disinformation and might honestly think it's true and then feel that it's their duty to share it, people might share misinformation. These kinds of folks tend to benefit from seeing verifiably true fact checks. They tend to benefit from observed correction. And we can target that information at scale to try to help the information environment share more verifiably accurate information as compared to less verifiably accurate information. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for such a wonderful event. I'm just delighted to be a part of it. Thank you.
Opportunity to share so much information, and the speakers have been incredible. It is just so hard to believe that 70% falsehoods are 70% more likely to be retweeted than the truth. So people prefer to listen to the sensationalism than anything else. And then you say to yourself, if you are ethical, why are you sharing disinformation? But we'll get to all of those questions soon. Our final panelist this morning, fifth and final panelist, is Mr. Augustine Ferdinand. Mr. Ferdinand entered the world of media as a radio announcer and host for We FM and administrative manager of Star Radio, earning recognition for his charismatic presence and communication skills. Eager to broaden his horizons, he pursued a Bachelor of Science in Political Science with law at the University of the West Indies, Cave Hill, completing his studies in 2017. Returning to St. Vincent and the Grenadines, he entered public service as a research officer to the Prime Minister in 2018, a role he holds today. His media presence continues through hosting the widely recognized program Shake Up on We FM. Currently a master's student in labor and employment relations, Augustine also serves as a trustee for JCI St. Vincent within Junior Chamber International. His commitment to leadership and community involvement led to his appointment as director of the Institute of Governance and Politics in August 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, our speaker in person is Mr. Augustine Ferdinand.
Thank you very much, moderator. Protocol having been established, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Today, the discussion as presented by my prior colleagues, identifying misinformation, disinformation, propaganda, and fake news. Much of what I have here have already been said before, so I'll go through speedily. But the distinction between misinformation and disinformation is basically, one, misinformation is where persons who are innocent, well-meaning, see a news story, something on social media, and they unintentionally, they share it. While disinformation is someone who knows it's not real, knows it's false, but still they go ahead and they share it nonetheless. I often call them the mischief makers. Now, in understanding, in looking at the sources of misinformation and disinformation, today we live in an age where the internet plays an integral role in our lives. By the time we wake in the morning, we go on our phone, we look at what is trending oftentimes. So we have social media, where you have rapid dissemination of information in instant moment. As said prior by Professor Wagner, 10 followers, 10 persons can share a misleading information, and before you know it, by next 2 hours, you have 10,000 persons sharing that story. That's where we are today. There's news outlets. There are some news outlets, they are more focused on commercial, money making, and of course with that comes with sensational headlines. Clickbait stories, what's trending, what's catchy. So we have news outlets, and some of them, they're biased, can either lean left, right, center, right. And you also have those who report stories that are from unreliable sources. And then of course you have individuals, you and I, our friends, our parents, our other colleagues. Of course, there are various examples of misinformation. And recently, during the height of the pandemic, oh my, we saw a lot of misinformation and disinformation. So here we have a BBC coronavirus story where, first of all, and we know this, there are some persons who linked coronavirus with 5G, and how that started. A simple video that came out of China, but really and truly it was a smart lamppost, not a 5G antenna, a smart lamppost, where they were basically doing installation and maintenance, and someone tried and they actually linked that to coronavirus, and that is how it became worldwide, that coronavirus is linked with 5G. Well, we all know today, ladies and gentlemen, that's false, fake, and a rumor. We have another example, a CBC story from Prince Edward Island, where basically disinformation now, you had a news story about a suspension of driver's license who basically illegally passed school buses. And of course, the proximity with Canada and the United States, there are some of their colleagues and friends in the US of A who felt that that also applies to them. And you also had those who knew it didn't apply, but shared it nonetheless. And you have basically over 5.8 million Facebook interactions. And then there are persons who knew the story, they didn't apply to them, but they shared it nonetheless. Disinformation, misinformation. There's another example. In France, you have 70 COVID-19 cases that occurred. Of course, France, they were looking to reopen the schools, but reality, the reopening of schools didn't really lead to the increased infection. But what happened is that the article missed out some crucial information, where later on in the article, persons realized that the infection or the various infections occurred prior to the opening of school. But catchy, clickbait, what's trending, coronavirus causing deadly new inflammatory fever was the trend of the day, and that is misinformation. There's another one, basically from a Business Insider. Every Kirklees business given is 0 and 1-star food hygiene rating. Obviously, an innocent reader like yourself, myself, we see that and we're like, oh my gosh, Kirklees basically, I've been buying from there all the time. What happened? You're wondering if you're going to get sick. But reality, again, the real story, not all Kirklees business, there was some. Again, misinformation. Identifying propaganda. The acting Prime Minister, Sean Edward, he more or less spoke about, the Caribbean and the political arena. We're in the Caribbean, we're not new to propaganda from either aisle. You get it. Videos, news articles, party supporters. But propaganda basically is a form of communication where it is intended to shape particular opinions and also alter behavior. And oftentimes they are biased. You can have news stories, political parties. They are misleading and they promote a specific agenda. Now, where do these come from? I listened to my prior colleagues, but one of the things I realized that wasn't focused on is the commercial side of things. And we get that every day, whether online or even in the supermarkets. We'll get to that. So you have political propaganda, war propaganda, yes, war propaganda, whether war in the Middle East, war in Iraq, wherever. You get war propaganda. There's ideological, left versus right, one versus the other. And of course, moving with propaganda, here's an example. The ambassador is here, Professor Wagner and others. One of the things that occurred in the United States of America is during the running of then President Obama. And this again became worldwide, where many persons started to question the legitimacy of then President to run for office. Where did that come from? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it started with something called the birther movement. Yep, where basically an individual who felt, that, hey, I can't look at Obama to be president, and started this whole thing saying that President Obama came from Kenya. That's where it started. He's Kenyan, he's not American. And then in reality, President Obama himself had to bring his birth certificate, his passport, to show that he was an actual American. He is an actual American citizen. And then even despite that, it continued on and on. You had different political rallies that carried on this rumor. Again, this was started by the birtherism movement, which falsely claimed that President Obama also was a secret Muslim. There was a photo with President Obama in hijab, Muslim wear, and trust me, it ran out of control. But that's one example. There's another one, which is more recent. There's a spread of right-wing evangelicals across the United States of America. And they are basically linking that, the principle of America is that God first. And you had, even during the riots of the Capitol, and as you see in the photos, some right-wing evangelicals carrying the cross. And it made them feel that, they believe that Trump's election lost threatened God's special plan for the country. And they saw themselves as patriot, and therefore they went and they created a riot. This, of course, had serious implications. Again, propaganda, altering behavior. You had many persons who believed that, this is special. Trump was, God's person, or not sending a message, trying to heal America, etc. And basically, they came out in their numbers and started a riot on the Capitol. Again, this shows the danger, and acting Prime Minister Sean Edwards basically linked weapon to information. This is an example of that, where information was weaponized for a particular agenda, which at the time was to basically install Mr. Trump. And then you have the commercial side of things. Today we have on advertising packages for tobacco that smoking is bad for your health, thanks to many years of scientific evidence. But before, in our era, you also had those who created advertising labels saying that based on their packaging, it is good for you. And they also said that it was scientifically proven. According to Stanford research on impact of tobacco smoking, Chesterfield began its campaign, which was "It's best for you." Nice tagline. It's best for you. And it came across as the best cigarette for smokers. Misleading, manipulative slogan. Then, of course, the slogan made the false and misleading health claim, which continued up to the 1960s. Of course, later on, during 1994, the FTC basically, upon review, basically suggests that the lower tar, that the claim that the lower tar and nicotine content was less harmful, that was false, and now you have on your labels that smoking is indeed bad for you. Moving right along, fake news. Fake news refers to the false or misleading information that is presented as genuine, often characterized by inaccurate information with a deliberate intent to mislead and emotionally charge people. And you have the different sources, websites, which are sometimes unreliable. You have satiricals, news outlets, traditional ones, and social media. And of course, one of the presenters before mentioned AI videos, AI generated images. That's also part of fake news. Now, some persons may be familiar with these two. The CBC senior disinformation reporter, Mr. Rogers, investigated a Justin Trudeau blog that went viral saying that Trudeau government handed out $465 million to Afghanistan, which basically disappeared. Reality, that was fake. And what it shows is that the Canadian government more or less contributed to the fund, but it wasn't $465 million. Another one, closer to home, former Minister of National Security and, of course, former FIFA Vice President, Jack Warner, during his trial defense, cited a satirical from the Onion News which he used it as a supporting evidence stating that FIFA basically, that the United States of America pressured, FIFA. But reality, like you see there, he cited it from an unreliable, it's a satirical. It's a satire. We all know what that is, and therefore it was unreliable, fake. And coming closer to AI-generated videos. Unfortunately, I thought that I wouldn't have much time, so I didn't have the video here, but if you look closely, you would almost think that that is actual President Obama. That is a video with an AI-generated Obama. And you have in that instance, I'll read it here, that Conan O'Brien basically acted with Al Pacino and had the same features of Hadders and the like. And you have President Obama here in an AI-generated video which showed him making derogatory statements of Trump, when later on it was discovered that it was fake using video software programming. Ladies and gentlemen, and this brings me to the question where we now have AI-generated videos where we can see, you can see yourself, myself, anywhere around the world, someone looking like you, sounding like you, but it's not really you. And how do we therefore combat that? And then, of course, Cambridge Analytica, this in the United Kingdom, where the Cambridge Analytica and the head at the time, Alexander Nix, had bragging rights about using political tactics and having persons more or less fabricate stories. Dangerous age we live in. Fabricating stories and manipulating false information to influence voters. And the effect we have, and my previous colleague from St. Kitts mentioned, democracy. This is where our democracy can be undermined. That's an impact. Now, we can skip past that. The impact of society. Erosion of trust. Diminished trust in institutions, media, and information sources. False narratives influencing public opinion, undermining democracy. You have polarization, left versus right, propaganda, contributing to creation of echo chambers and reinforcing pre-existing belief. My Professor Wagner spoke of the possibility or probability of persons who are disinformed to change their minds. Those who are misinformed to change their minds. Echo chamber reinforcing pre-existing beliefs. And as closer to home, COVID-19 pandemic, public health emergency, misinformation that we saw can lead to death. And we'll look much closer to that. COVID-19. We see here, again, the impact on society where Brian Lee was a patient at a hospital and he believed in the 5G story. But he was on his bed in the hospital, hooked up to oxygen. And he said we didn't follow the rules. He said basically that they believed in the 5G story. And his wife also, she was unresponsive. And they read an online conspiracy story. Talking about conspiracy, a lot of these are also on YouTube, spreading false information. They thought the disease was a hoax and no worse than a flu. However, they caught it and they now realize that COVID-19 was definitely fake. It shouldn't take you to be on your bed to then realize, again, the dangers and the impact on society. There are fact-checking tools, some mentioned before. They're crucial in ensuring accuracy and reliability, contributes to trust in media and institution. Professor Ben Cosme, my learned friend, he said the 3 Ds, detect, document, and debunk. I like that. Detect, document, and debunk. It prevents the spread of false and misleading content. And of course, it empowers individuals to be crucial consumers of information and better equipped to participate in the democratic process and make sound decisions, not only as consumers, but electorate. Very important. Of course, there are some fact-checking websites, some mentioned before. You have PolitiFact, you have factcheck.org, you have BBC Reality Check, and there are also bias ratings that you can also check online. You have to be aware of clickbait, emotional languages. You have to be aware of selective footage. I know these often used during war stories, selective footage. You also have to be aware of biases, beliefs. You have to be able to confirm and debunk falsehoods. You have to ensure that they're authentic information prior to sharing it. That's one of the things many do not do. We do not fact check. We do not double check. We do not verify. We share it nonetheless. And you also have to make sure, and this is coming closer to the Caribbean because we have a serious issue. We recognize it during the pandemic. Some were said before, linking vaccine to infertility. Again, dangerous. That the vaccine made you grow scales on your skin. Dangerous again. That somehow the vaccine will cause death. And all these things handicapped our public health system, led to death in some instances, and where even today some persons are still suffering from chronic illness as a result of that. In order to effectively mitigate the dissemination of misinformation, it is critical, and Acting Prime Minister is here, that governments, technology companies, and media organizations work together to establish communications network standards and code of ethics. That is something that we need to do in the Caribbean. The Caribbean fight against misinformation and disinformation. Again, during the height of the pandemic, we experienced it the most, where some of our loved ones, who even though we talk to them, they still believe what they saw on YouTube or Facebook, conspiracy theories, and therefore you had some initiatives where some journalists came together in Latin America and the Caribbean, and they basically had a workshop, and this is to help combat, this at the time was to help combat misinformation, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. It included communicators, editors, photographers, Mr. Hunt, journalists like yourself, those on radio. And very important to where we are now, the UNESCO office in Kingston supported another virtual workshop focusing on media literacy in an age of disinformation last year, with 23 Caribbean media professionals. And of course, this workshop was more or less to focus on developing a plan to develop a regional code of practice on disinformation and misinformation. And two, part of the recommendation is to try and develop AI fact-checking technology, because like I said, you now have videos that are created via artificial intelligence, and you have to get AI to detect these. So therefore, ladies and gentlemen, again, I thank all those who organized this activity, and I hope that this workshop left you with something to think about, a lot of information on how we together, collectively, can combat misinformation and disinformation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ferdinand. In the interest of time, we're only going to take about 1 or 2 questions, and we hope that the questions can be answered by any one of the panelists. So where is my roaming person with the mic? Is there any question that you would like to pose to any of our panelists this morning before we take a short break? Yes. Do you have any questions? You're just dying for a break. Not dying, but. Well, I have a question. Ahead of the 2024 presidential election, what specific challenges do you all anticipate? And what and where, how do we fact check any of that ahead of the 2024 general elections in the US?
Thank you very much, moderator. Well, as I showed before, you now have AI technology with videos. I expect more of that. I expect more of that. The good thing with the United States in terms of political ads, you therefore have to let them know that this ad is endorsed by this or that political party. So that's first part in identifying the bias of the ad. But fact-checked websites, I believe, will be more utilized. And various journalists within the United States of America and even around the world have to promote this, because in this age of social media, this age of information, you will get more of the artificial videos, you will get more of bots, and this is something that wasn't mentioned also, algorithms on social media. The United States of America has some tools at its advantage, is that some of these social media entities are registered in the United States, and therefore you can easily regulate them to have, which already exists, part of their own policy, the tools necessary in identifying fake news or misinformation. We've seen that during COVID-19, where platforms like Facebook, you also have Instagram, and more needs to be ramped up there, and even YouTube. They were able to do that because these companies are registered there, and therefore they are able to utilize the regulations so that the policies, the company owners can, like Zuckerberg, can strengthen. I think this is what will have to be emphasized by the United States authorities, to strengthen their policies and regulations to nip it even tighter. So I believe that is what will have to happen.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ferdinand. Yes, Senator Girard? Girard here. Girard here?
Thank you, Jawa here.
Jawa here.
Yes, my question is also for Mr. Ferdinand, as Director of the Institute of Governance and Politics. In countries like St. Lucia, where our Constitution speaks of freedom of expression, have you been able to work with any governments to work on any legislation to combat disinformation and fake news? And if not, what recommendations can you provide for legislators?
Thank you very much for that question. As mentioned, I am also a manager of a radio station in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Currently, we are working on regulation pertaining to broadcasting standards. And these standards are most specifically geared towards targeting traditional media, so you have the usual newspapers, radio stations, television stations. The problem we have in looking at the drafted guidelines is how do we, I asked the question during the meeting then, how do you regulate something that wasn't meant to be regulated, which is the internet? And that is where we have the difficulty, and we'll have to come up with practical solutions. Like I mentioned, maybe as journalists who are part of the association, we can come together to say, well, you know what, based on the story that you're releasing, you have a sticker online that says this information was fact-checked. You can do that as a practical thing. But again, the problem now is that anyone can become a journalist overnight, can become a blogger overnight. So it's easier from a practical standpoint for any regulator, any government, because a radio station has to apply for license. A television station has to apply for license. And therefore you can say, well, hey, we look at certain information that you disseminated, you are in breach of the standards that we agreed upon. And therefore, either your license can be revoked, which might be a bit too harsh, but there can be a fine to try and alter your behavior. So I can tell you that currently in St. Vincent and Grenadines, we are doing that, and we're hoping that it can be a model for the rest of the region. And this is also based on the law that exists in Trinidad and Tobago, but we have to tweak it to our own local circumstances. All right?
Thank you so much. I'd like to take this opportunity to, I know you are a burning question over there. I would like to take this opportunity first and foremost to thank our 5 panelists for this morning, for sharing such valuable information. We would like to take a 5-minute break in order for us to resume with the second panel. It's difficult to be moderator because I am just a very polite person, but yes, please, Mr. Springer.
It seems as though we've been speaking about, especially in 2024, we're talking about elections in America. But we tend to forget what we are here about today. I am more interested in what is happening right now in Taiwan, where the opposition, so to speak, are coming together to fight the DPP, who are now. Are they going to be using Chinese misinformation and disinformation, propaganda to fight against the DPP? That is the question, because this is the big news in Taiwan right now.
Thank you so much, Mr. Springer. Always very insightful. I don't know if any of our online panelists want to respond to that question before we break.
I see someone there.
Ms. Chin, did you hear the question?
Yes. Thank you for your question. We are encounter a big wave of misinformation and disinformation just during because the presidential election. So but however, this year, compared to 4 years ago, compared to previous presidential election, there is a big challenge for us. The disinformer attacking the weakness of our information ecosystems. So it's not only, the disinformer is not only spreading misinformation, but also he put a lot of misleading information on social media to trigger our mainstream media copy those kind of information and rewrite them as a news. And also a lot of experienced journalists, they get the information from some secret person. So they write, there are a lot of exclusive news written by an experienced journalist. However, they are fake news. So we are, so this year, when China conducts the information operation, he is always hiding behind the story. It's pretty challenged for the researcher and for the fact checkers to prove those kind of fake news, misinformation, or the information we are not sure it's from journalists or it's pretty fake. It's pretty hard to verify. Those kind of information is pretty hard to prove it's wronged by China, because China totally know he need to hiding behind the scene. Otherwise, the Taiwanese society has awareness. If we know the information is from China, then China will lose the election. So this year, the big challenge is all the misinformation and it's so hard to prove it's conducted by China. And also China is not only conduct the information operation, he also used a lot of strategy and tricks, just invent the election directly. For example, one of our candidates, he was a businessman. He ran a big company, Foxconn, in China. So China just sent the official to do the auditing. So that act will totally throw this candidate just can be candidate anymore, because his company was under threat. So actually China has put a lot of short-term strategy and acts, not only the information operation, but also invent the election directly. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much. And once again, thank you to our panelists. And we will take a 5-minute break. When we resume for panel number 2, Democratic Resilience, Information Warfare and Electoral Interference. Thank you.
Rising sea level, stronger hurricanes, and loss of ecosystems threaten the countries and people of the Caribbean. President Biden launched the U.S.-Caribbean Partnership to Address the Climate Crisis 2030 at the Summit of the Americas in 2022 to help our neighbors confront these challenges. BACC 2030 advances climate adaptation and resilience and expands clean energy across the region through the expertise of the U.S. government, new investments, and strengthening local capacity. Together, the U.S. and Caribbean are tackling climate change and regional challenges to benefit the Caribbean today and for future generations. Learn more at state.gov/BACC 2030.
How would you like to spend time in Taiwan? For Taiwan. How would you like to spend time in Taiwan? For Taiwan.
Rising sea level, stronger hurricanes, and loss of ecosystems threaten the countries and people of the Caribbean. President Biden launched the U.S.-Caribbean Partnership to Address the Climate Crisis 2030 at the Summit of the Americas in 2022 to help our neighbors confront these challenges. BACC 2030 advances climate adaptation and resilience and expands clean energy across the region through the expertise of the U.S. government, new investments, and strengthening local capacity. Together, the U.S. and Caribbean are tackling climate change and regional challenges to benefit the Caribbean today and for future generations. Learn more at state.gov/BACC 2030.
To the P-Toes, chill while the breeze blow, baby, and I wanna ride on the East Coast. Bad and bougie like amigos, I wanna feel you. Come and lock me like a cheat code. I can pack it up and you can move it like a repo. Come to town and I'll take you around pretty St. Lucia. girls on the beat, swimming in Super. Sipping on Chairman's and Cranberry, got a couple of my links on the way. Take a line by island breeze, listen to the ocean speak. Bet you say you're never gonna leave. I'm in town, let me take you around, pretty St. Lucia. It's my town, I'ma take you around, pretty St. Lucia. Come to town, I'll take you around, pretty St. Lucia. Come to town, I'll take you around, pretty St. Lucia.
I think it might work better if I walk around and I say, may I invite you back to your seats, please? Thank you. That's the protocol. It's been such an exciting morning, so much to share, so much information. Honorable Minister Edward, are you around? You're not around? All right, Ambassador Chen is seated, and the rest of you will take your positions when you are ready. But we begin the second panel, panel number 2, Democratic Resilience, Information Warfare, and Electoral Interference. This panel will explore the intricate dynamics of safeguarding democratic processes against information warfare and electoral interference. We have a distinguished lineup of speakers who will share their expertise and insights on strategies to enhance democratic resilience in the face of evolving challenges. Our first speaker is Dr. Mayoko Ichihara, Professor, Graduate School of Law and the School of International and Public Policy, Assistant Vice President for International Affairs. I will just like to say that I've cut all of the bios almost to one paragraph, so please forgive me, panelists online. Welcome, Dr. Ichihara. Good afternoon now.
Okay, so let me start my slides. Okay, thank you very much for your invitation to GCTN this year. Well, I'm really excited about this participation. Well, I conduct research on China's influence operations in Japan and some of the authoritarian cooperation in the Japanese information ecosystem. So I would like to focus on the case of Japan in thinking about it. There has been actually pretty much increased interest in disinformation in Japan due to the massive inflow of disinformation in the Japanese information ecosystem in recent years, having coronavirus as the former previous panel was talking about, together with Russian aggression of Ukraine, which brought a number of disinformation. This summer, we had another massive inflow of disinformation related to Japanese government's discharging of treated water from Fukushima area. And the graph shows the number of tweets and mentions on disinformation related to in the Japanese ecosystem. During this, 3 months period, from July to September. And, there were indeed a massive number of, tweets and the like, because of the, constant appearance of disinformation in the Japanese, information system. Well, when we look at the sources of disinformation, there's nothing unique about Japan. We see a tendency that can be seen in other places as well. We have those foreign actors like CCP media and Russian media that are trying to spread narratives and also disinformation. Which are joined by diaspora media in the country, and also trolls joins the spreading of those disinformation and some distorted narratives. We also have Japanese political parties spreading some of the disinformation, and Japanese influencers. And PR companies in Japan as well as outside of the country are employed by both Japanese influencers and also foreign actors to spread distorted narratives and disinformation. Well, out of my interest, because I'm a political scientist, so I focus on 3 patterns of disinformation. One is for their parties and camps, so for political purposes, and another types of actors work for Russia, and another type of actors work for China. And what we can see throughout those different types of actors is information laundering. When it comes to disinformation, we often hear that fire hose of falsehood gets effective in impacting people, which means that when people see the same kind of information or narratives in multiple outlets for multiple times, we tend to believe in the narratives and disinformation, and that's what has been conducted in the information ecosystem in Japan as well. Because I believe in scientific method of analyzing narratives and disinformation in order to scientifically counter those disinformation activities. So I conduct correspondence analysis, and what you see right now is a graph which shows the relations of terminologies that are used that appeared in articles from AFP-BB, which is a Japanese sort of branch of AFP. This Japanese branch of AFP-BB is a bit problematic in a sense that they are operated by an actor, by a company, which have been also running multiple Chinese diaspora media. And AFP-BB actually functions as a de facto aggregator site, and they also post news from Xinhua News, CGTN, CNS, or other Chinese CCP media, in addition to AFP. And what they did during the summertime, during the 3 months period where we saw a massive inflow of disinformation related to the discharge of treated water from Fukushima area, was that they actually spread a lot of news on this discharging using the term contaminated water, and those news sources were more often Xinhua News and CGTN than AFP. The same type of information laundering have been seen in other outlets as well. This is original sources of contents reprinted by Record China, which is one of the Chinese diaspora media in Japan. And as you can see, they have been publishing a lot of information from People's Daily, Global Times, as well as other diaspora media like the World Video, British International, and so forth. We have been also seeing a growing Russo-Chinese cooperation in the Japanese information ecosystem. Taking an example of Russian aggression of Ukraine, we saw that Chinese diaspora started spreading disinformation or propaganda from Russia, while they used to be spreading information related to China. And this graph also shows that shows a correspondence analysis on tweets from quite famous Chinese troll named the Asia Press Club. And the name of the country that are located close to those weak information means that the country was mentioned a lot during this week. And I took the week from February 10th to the end of March, I think, or end of April actually, in 2022. And you can see that while they were tweeting a lot about China up until week of February 17th, they switched to talk about Russia and Ukraine from after then. So what are the impacts? Taking an example of Russian aggression of Ukraine in the Japanese information space, we saw a massive tweets and likes of the Twitter account of Russian embassy in Japan. And indeed, the Russian embassy in Japan's Twitter account was one of the most influential Russian Twitter accounts during the early phase of Russian aggression of Ukraine in the world. Also, what we have been seeing is that, unfortunately, those liberal intellectuals in Japan that seek to see peace in the between Russia and Ukraine are influenced by Russian propaganda. The correspondence analysis I conducted on articles of whataboutism that they wrote related to Russia's aggression in Ukraine shows that slightly more negative adjectives were used in relations with NATO and West compared to much more positive adjectives. And also, they showed that they considered China as not related to the war in Ukraine. So they were showing a lack of understanding or weak awareness about China's role in the war. And yet, it does not mean that these disinformation or narrative warfare is making so much, huge impact in the Japanese society. Actually, Japan remains slightly skeptical about views on China, even though Chinese media and also diaspora media and trolls have been trying to spread narratives that warm up image about China. Finally, what has the Japanese government been doing to counter disinformation? Well, various ministries have launched their own initiatives to counter disinformation, and there's going to be a new specialized organization of interministerial aspect within the cabinet secretariat to counter measures against foreign influence operations. But when we think about the current backlash in the United States, which shows that those governmental involvement in countering disinformation tend to be considered as sort of repression of the right to freedom of speech in the country. Well, we have to think about also the danger or the difficulty of having state actors in countermeasures. So private actors' efforts is going to be pretty much important. What we see right now in Japan is that research is led by information engineers and law scholars. That actually shows that they do not have so much background knowledge about international relations. So that's a bit of negative aspect. There's no joint information collection or sharing mechanism though, and so that's something that we have to see. So finally, what we have to see in the future is that in order to conduct research on disinformation and understand what functions to counter those disinformation, rapid information sharing about disinformation related to each other's country, cross-country, will be important. And sharing data and conducting comparative analysis will help identify the narratives authoritarian countries are intended to convey. And these data sharing for a collaborative approach would to influence operation research will move the field forward, I believe. So thank you very much. That's it for me.
Professor, particularly important, highlighting the importance of sharing information and sharing data across countries. Our next speaker is Mr. Matthew Schrader, advisor at the International Republican Institute in the United States of America. Mr. Schrader is an advisor on China for the International Republican Institute in Washington, D.C. He holds an M.A. in Asian Studies from George Washington University and an undergraduate degree from the George Washington University. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome Mr. Matthew Schrader. Good morning, Mr. Schrader.
Good morning. I didn't get quite the introduction some of the previous panelists got, so I'll also add that bona fides for me are I lived and worked in China for 9 years, speak Mandarin, have translated books from Chinese into English, and have just kind of been generally obsessed with this topic for going on 2 decades now. So that's why you should care about anything I have to say on anything related to China. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here real quick and get this guy going. So I wanted to talk a little bit about sort of how one-party states, not just China, but one-party states generally think about the idea of shaping perceptions in other countries. Because I think especially for a lot of people in democracies, it can be difficult to wrap your head around some of the differences in how these states and democratic states go about this stuff, because the approaches can be very, very different. and people tend to sort of mirror what they know onto the one-party states and can end up sort of reaching very erroneous conclusions about what the information they're being given means, how to evaluate it, and how to act upon it. So just, why do we even care about this? My institution, IRI, our whole thing, we're part of the National Endowment for Democracy family. So we exist to reinforce what we call the infrastructure of democracy globally. So that's things like helping civil society run good elections in other countries, helping to support investigative journalism, helping emerging democracies build political party systems, just everything that we consider integral to liberal democracies. And we've done that for 40 years now. We didn't plan to work on the impact that China and Russia are having on the rest of the world. 10 years ago, we were working in China. We were having very cordial meetings with government officials there. But, as of about 5 or 6 years ago, we increasingly saw China and Russia showing up in the other places where we worked. So we saw the impact of China and Russia on our governance and transparency work in Latin America. Or on our elections programming in Central Asia or Eastern Europe. And it sort of became increasingly clear within the Institute that, we needed to be able to work with civil society in other countries and political parties to sort of help them figure out, what does this mean now that these large authoritarian actors are having larger impacts on your local governance environment, and how do you respond to it? So that's why my team exists. That's why I do what I do. I work with teams around the world, including Latin America and Caribbean. We do a lot of good work with people in Jamaica, Guyana, Ecuador, on sort of trying to make sure they can maximize the upsides and minimize the downsides of bilateral relationships with the PRC and other large one-party states. And in that capacity, we've done a lot of research on how these countries try to shape perceptions in other places. And so I'm going to try to keep this as brief and non-mind numbing as possible. So I'm just going to hit some, very high level stuff very quickly. Generally, something we find that's true for all authoritarian states is it's harder to find information that countervails the official state narrative many times if you are somebody from outside that country trying to evaluate what you're being told by people in that country. I always like to make the comparison with democracies here. I'm going to use the US because it's the example that everybody knows. If you're wanting to understand the problems the United States has, there's no lack of ways to go about doing it. You can learn about our homelessness, our crime, our issues with misinformation and disinformation, political polarization, anything under the sun that our society is struggling with. You have a wealth of information to figure out and decide for yourself the validity of what's coming from the government's mouth. That's much less true in the case of one-party states because the states value keeping tight control of perceptions and narratives. And it's something that I think a lot of people really tend to undervalue is that a lot of times these states have a lot more resources to throw at the question of shaping perceptions globally, which is a strange thing to say if you're comparing the United States with China, for example. The United States economy is about 40% larger than China's. We have our famous military budget. The State Department is very well funded, although, they may disagree. But the resources at the disposal of, for example, the PRC state are vastly outstrip, in many cases, what the US government can bring to bear because they directly control some of the world's largest corporations. They directly control the world's largest coal mining company or some of the world's largest banks or the world's largest steel manufacturing or boat building. Basically, any large, hard industry, you're probably going to find a major PRC corporation sitting at the top of the league tables. And those resources are at the disposal of the PRC state to help with shaping perceptions, particularly among political elites in other countries. And the state there very keenly perceives the link between providing economic benefits and shaping perceptions, and again, particularly political elites in other countries. And these states tend to be more willing to coerce and corrupt in the course of trying to either suppress certain narratives or elevate others to get people to speak on their behalf by corrupting them. I'm not here trying to defend the virtue of democracies or American democracy generally. I live and work in DC, and I can assure you that the city is full of horrible people willing to do horrible things. The issue is there's a much higher price to be paid, usually, for people in a democracy who want to do those kind of things than in a one-party state. Basically, there's the risk you'll get found out. There's the risk your political opponents will weaponize it against you. There's all kinds of risks associated with bad behavior that even though we may perceive impunity on the part of our elites, there's not really a comparison between what happens here and what happens someplace like Russia or China. And so consequently, there's fewer consequences for them when they want to deploy those kinds of tools abroad. And corruption particularly is the issue that we run into everywhere with all these actors, but especially with China in Latin America. It comes up over and over and over again. And so the tactics that we find these actors using, there's been a lot of focus on disinformation and misinformation in the digital space here today, which is, I don't want to downplay that. It's incredibly important. That's our public square right now. But I think our team, we tend to find that people are not focusing on what we think are maybe the most powerful avenues of perception shaping for China, Russia, other states, which is simply normal business, trade, and finance. The perception, albeit somewhat inaccurate in some cases, that China is the economic future. China's model is a model that other countries want to follow. China has all of these things that we can offer you. The reality is often a lot more complex than that, but the elite interlocutors that China's dealing with in other countries are not going to get the other side of the story from their PRC counterparts. You have to go seek that out. And it can be difficult to access that information because the party, the CCP, goes out of its way to make sure in a lot of cases that that information is not widely available. And in giving these sorts of incentives, using business, trade, and finance incentives are a very powerful way to shape what elites in other countries think, what they say, how they behave, what kinds of narratives they help propagate out into their wider society about one-party states like China. It could also trickle down into what we call the knowledge economy. China, Russia, Iran, they do like to directly endow things like think tanks and university programs, which can be really important sources of expertise and policy knowledge in many societies. If you need to know about China, go to your local university or think tank. But there's kind of a layer under that where a lot of times also, universities, think tanks, a lot of them are in precarious funding situations. They're happy to take money from local business people or local companies. And in a lot of cases, local businesses and companies have very strong interests in elevating a particular perspective on what a country's relationship with China should look like. So this leveraging of business, trade, and finance has very powerful knock-on effects in terms of how these countries are spoken about, thought about, discussed in other countries. It's just as true as for Russia as well, particularly in Europe. They use many of the same tricks. And I'm not going to linger on digital disinformation because I feel like almost everybody else here is doing a much better job with it than I would do. So I'll just close by saying, some of the risks of the ways that these countries try to shape perception, particularly elite perception in other countries. Just number one at the top of the list is massive public corruption scandals. And this is by far the biggest risk in Latin America. I don't know if anybody in the room is familiar with the case of the Coca-Cola Sinclair Dam in Ecuador. It's a $4 billion hydroelectric project in Ecuador that was done together with a PRC state-owned enterprise, one of the largest. It was brought into existence under the previous Correa administration. It's now kind of only half functional because the dam has thousands of cracks in it and can't generate at anything near its full capacity. And a lot of the people involved with commissioning and doing the project are, either on trial or in jail because of how widespread the corruption was in the winning of these contracts. And again, getting back to the whole sort of willingness to coerce and corrupt, this isn't sort of like a value judgment about anybody's inherent virtue, democracy versus authoritarianism. It's more just like, if you're a manager in the PRCSOE and you want to win the contract, the way you do business at home is trying to bribe officials, because it's just how it works there. And you're going to bring that behavior abroad when you're trying to do the same thing. And you don't really have to worry about consequences back in Beijing because there's not an independent media. Again, this is not like a virtue statement. It's just kind of it's an evaluation of a dynamic that we've seen over and over again, everywhere from Latin America to Africa to Southeast Asia, where you have these pre-existing issues that can be worsened by the arrival of these actors who don't value transparency and governance in the same way that, and here I'll be sort of blunt and categorical, that most democratic partners do. So that's my only blunt and categorical statement for the presentation, and that's where I'm going to close out. Last thing I'll just say, if you want to know more about this, the subject of China and Russia's influence in the world, wildly complex subject. People can and do write volumes of books on it. This QR code will take you to my organization's page for our work on this subject. We have lots of reports. Some of them won't put you to sleep, I promise. And please do feel free to be in touch if you have any further questions. So thank you to everybody.
Thank you so much, Mr. Schrader. You made some very valuable points that we hope to explore in our question and answer session, particularly about coercion and corruption. Very, very, very important topics. At this point, we would like to welcome our third panelist, Mr. Mark Billera, Acting Deputy Assistant Administrator for USAID Bureau for Democracy, Human Rights, and Governance. Good morning, sir. It's afternoon now. Good afternoon, sir. How are you?
I am well. Thank you very much, Ms. Pilgrim-George. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, or today, as you said. USAID's Bureau for Democracy, Human Rights, and Governance leads USAID's efforts to invigorate democracy, enhance human rights and justice, and bolster governance that advances the public interest and delivers inclusive development in the countries where our agency works overseas. This is why I'm very pleased to be a part of this panel that emphasizes the centrality of overall election integrity in developing and maintaining democratic resilience. Information manipulation is a major threat to election integrity. USAID views the widespread prevalence of information manipulation and the co-opting of trusted information systems to be closely affiliated with the rise in authoritarianism, touching on the previous presentation. And it's an issue that affects all of our work in the Bureau that I represent. Information manipulation campaigns can undermine the integrity of democratic values and institutions, while online hate speech or polarizing content can exacerbate social divisions that lead to offline violence and atrocities. And while these are year-round problems, elections serve as a flashpoint for information manipulation from malign actors, both foreign and domestic. So, What's USAID doing about it? We are taking a proactive approach to addressing information manipulation and supporting information integrity and resilience during elections and, in fact, all the time. Our aim is to strengthen local actors so they can build resilience to the information manipulation, improve information integrity, and find community-led and owned solutions. I want to share with you 3 areas USAID is focusing upon to support long-term, locally driven solutions to addressing information manipulation and building information integrity and resilience, including during elections, that could perhaps provide as food for thought for programming in the Caribbean and elsewhere. The first area is, broadly, the promotion of information integrity and resilience through our long-standing investments in support for independent media, civil society, governance, and other sectors. To promote healthy information ecosystems, our programs support journalists to develop and grow their audiences, establish more sustainable sources of revenue, leverage digital tools and technology to broaden their audiences and strengthen engagement with them, and protect themselves from increasing digital, legal, psychosocial, and physical threats to their lives and livelihoods. We're also focusing on providing tools and resources to further promote information integrity, as well as considering how to adapt to the challenges posed by information disorder, new technologies, and polarizing narratives and their impact on social cohesion. USAID's Promoting Information Integrity and Resilience, or the ProInfo initiative, was announced at the 2023 Summit for Democracy last March. ProInfo will support the development of coordinated solutions and apply evidence-based undertakings to strengthen the resilience, inclusivity, and integrity of diverse information ecosystems rooted in international human rights standards. This initiative will increase multi-stakeholder, diplomatic, and private sector engagement and donor coordination to strengthen information integrity, inclusivity, and resilience, bolster the availability of trustworthy, verifiable, respectful, and safe content from diverse sources, and support rapid response efforts to bolster the capabilities of USAID missions and partners to respond to urgent information disorder threats. While not part of ProInfo, I want to share an example of programming that promotes information integrity and resilience and ensures communities have access to independent, fact-based news. The Investigative Reporting Initiative of the Americas, a recently ended activity actually, supported by USAID and the State Department, bolstered in-depth investigative journalism in 20 countries, working in collaboration with regional media platforms such as the Media Institute of the Caribbean, and the initiative produced 227 high-impact investigative pieces, awarded more than 150 grants to individuals and media outlets, trained over 2,000 journalists, and produced investigations in Spanish, French, and English. This work uncovered approximately $36.6 billion in mismanaged public funding. The second area of focus is advancing gender equality and women's empowerment. Women in politics and public life are often the targets of gender-based violence. New technologies have given rise to new forms and manifestations of this violence, known as technology-facilitated gender-based violence, such as gender disinformation, online attacks, and hate speech. And these new manifestations are occurring at a scale and speed not seen before. For example, Annalena Baerbock, Green Party candidate for chancellor in Germany in the 2021 election, was targeted by a Russian operation. Such attacks can lead to fewer women engaging in politics or other public-facing position and weaken democratic processes by misleading voters, potentially convincing them to vote in a specific direction, and by undermining half a population's free and equal ability to participate in politics. These effects trickle down to future generations as well. For example, a report by Plan International found that 20% of girls surveyed reported no longer engaging in politics or current affairs because of prevalent gendered disinformation. USAID's Transform program will invest up to $6 million over 3 years to fund the implementation of practical, contextualized solutions to technology-facilitated gender-based violence, including gender disinformation around the world, with a focus on its impact on women in politics and public life. Transform will endeavor to build bridges and increase gender expertise among the key stakeholders necessary to address this issue, including male-led civic technology organizations. We'll share lessons from our pilot activities in Kenya, Georgia, and Guatemala as we strive to help create a world in which women in all their diversity can engage safely at all levels of public life, including in electoral processes. The third area of focus relates directly to elections. Governments, election management bodies, candidates, political parties, civil society, and traditional media are often ill-equipped to prepare for and respond to information manipulation campaigns. This can lead to a complete loss of trust in the election process and results, which obviously is not good for democracy. So, in contexts where elections do deserve trust, it's essential that we build the capacity of election management bodies and governmental institutions, those who are on the front lines of elections, to combat information manipulation and to position themselves as the purveyors of trusted information, so journalists and other community members know where to turn. For example, USAID supported peer-to-peer cooperation among election management bodies in Mexico and Guatemala to strengthen their crisis communication planning for information manipulation threats and to strengthen their strategic use of social media to ensure citizens received accurate electoral information. This is just a snapshot of the significant work USAID is doing to strengthen information integrity and resilience globally, but it shows the myriad ways we can help communities address these issues. And when these information integrity efforts are paired with strong overall election integrity methods and tools, we can truly build stalwart systems that can stand up to malign influence not only during elections, but also every day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Billera. Our fourth speaker is Mrs. Lily Lee. Lily Lee is a doctoral fellow in the International Security Studies program at the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, Tufts University. Mrs. Lee's research focuses on the state security strategy of the Chinese Communist Party and the People's Liberation Army's information and influence operations. Good morning, good afternoon, Mrs. Lee.
Hi everyone, I'm Lily Minchen Lee, and this is my first visit to St. Lucia and my very first trip to the Caribbean. So if I seem like especially excited, it's not just about our fascinating discussions today, but it's also because I'm running away from the freezing weather in New England. So my presentation today will be concise and focus on information operation and the survival chain to counter disinformation. The kill chain model is widely used framework for understanding the strategies of the cyber attack, from initial reconnaissance to post-explorations activities. And in recent years, this model has also been applied to the realm of disinformation. As discussed earlier, disinformation technique varies, but they typically involve a sequence of steps. The information operation kill chain model essentially breaks down various steps of an attack conducted by malign actors. The process begins with the source of disinformation, which can be an individual, a group, or state actors. And the source is motivated to weaponize disinformation through development of the believable content and the usage of the agent and media to achieve a desired effect. Downstream from this enabling activities is delivery. It's post, share, and read across, thank you, and read across various media platforms and get amplified by sharing. To fight this, scholars have come up with a counter strategy, a survival chain. It counters the source motivations by exposing their plans to or making it costly for them to spread disinformation. When it comes to creating the disinformation, the civil society is getting better and better at spotting the fake news and accounts. And for delivery, the civil society also teams up with governments and social media platforms to quickly find, remove, or downplay the disinformation. Like cybersecurity, the impact of information operation could depend on how early the sequence is broken. Breaking the chain early is the key. So the breaking of an adversary information operation chain as early as possible will help us mitigating the impact of malign influence. So there are two stages could be added into the survival chain. That is strategic monitoring and digital forensics to counter the malign actor. The strategic monitoring involves mapping the ecosystems and assessed used by the threat actors, also filters the activity to different priorities and potentially harmful instances. And the digital forensics is an open source analysis to counter the interference of a command and control. Command and control here is referring to the interference from either China's state media or its state-owned media enterprise. However, even with the survival chain, there are several challenges in each state. When the local event occurs, for example, elections, it often involves domestic or foreign political pressures that would be complicated by its internal power structures. And trying to deter malign actors' motivation, we have to know whether it's political-driven, economic-driven, or from pure identity aspect. The challenge in digital forensics include achieving precise attributions and effectively utilizing open source intelligence, which are vital yet complex tests for unveiling the intricate web of ownership and tracking the multi-layers and network connecting involved in information operations. The difficulties in combating the proliferation of disinformation lies in the needs for a comparative approach that not only encompasses multimedia but also spans diverse language and operates on a large scales, posing challenge in effectively identifying and shutting down this disinformation campaign. Here, the narrative or the alternative narrative plays a key role, especially in terms of what is said and what is deliberately left unsaid through censorship. As for the downstream of the information operation chain, ensuring a comprehensive approach to disinformation analysis becomes particularly challenging when monitoring data owned by different platforms and navigating the complexity of cross-platform operations, which add layers of difficulties. Today's examples are concentrated on utilizing open source intelligence OSINT to trace ownership, along with its multi-layer and network. OSINT is used in disinformation research to gather data from public available source to identify, track, and analyze the spread of disinformation across various platforms. So, there are 4 distinctive disinformation YouTube clips that will showcase how China has utilized its security statecraft to shape the information environment. The YouTube channel called Hello Taiwan features a video where quote-unquote Taiwanese boys takes on the mooncake industry, dark cuisine, by eating a mooncake and highlighting the significant food safety issue in Taiwan. And the one on the left, the Taiwan Net channel uploaded a video alleging that Taiwan's ruling party has been deceived and tricked by the United States, resulting in expending $830 billion on elections. Through open source intelligence, we found out these seems like related to Taiwan is actually affiliated to the state administrations of press, publication, radio, film, and television that is affiliated with PRC state councils. Here's another 2 examples of this. The third disinformation video, which was crafted by merging various clips featuring the claims that the Chinese model of democracy surpassed of that of the United States in every single way, in every single aspect. And the 4th instance was the information operations on a narrative that the military theft in Taiwan has resulted in missile launcher being diverted into the positions of the criminal gangs armory. Again, these two channels are specific affiliated with PRC State Council. So here's an oversimplified graph of only a part of the China state's media hierarchy that affiliated with State Council of PRC. And these entities highlighted in blue have YouTube channels and TikToks. And the fourth channel we mentioned earlier are all affiliated with the State Council and have garnered a high volume of views with extensive share on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, and various communications apps. China's information operations are orchestrated by key state actors such as the PLA, People's Liberation Army, and State Council and its Taiwan's Affairs Office, the Cyber Administration of China, and the CCP United Front Work Department as well. These organizations play distinct role ranging from spreading manipulations, news on a social media platform like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, targeting Hong Kong protesters, Taiwan's government, and the United States democratic systems to leveraging Chinese celebrities for CCP propaganda. They also work on influence foreign business people and local officials work well to foster pro-CCP sentiment and connect their economic more closely with China's growth, often using incentives or threats. We can also learn that the PRC State Council is the main holder in the Beijing Xihai Culture Company, which owns a variety of quote-unquote private entertainment companies and YouTube channels. So this is where OSINT, open source intelligence, would come in handy to unpack the layers of the ownership and the influence within these state-owned media organization, revealing their connection to state entities and the broader implication of disinformation's disseminations. I'm concluding with 2 points. First, the disinformation ecosystem is intricate, encompasses various steps and layers. These complexities is necessitating a diverse range of approach and a framework for effective interventions. And these understanding is essential in developing a tailored strategy to counteract each aspect of the disinformation chain. And second, open source intelligence emerges as a powerful tool in revealing the disinformation chain. The OSINT capacities allows for the collections and the analysis of the public available data, which is pivotal in identifying, understanding, and mitigating disinformation campaign. By leveraging OSINT, we can trace the origins, track the speed of that, and access the impact of the disinformation, thereby playing a crucial role in early detection and intervention. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Mrs. Lee. Very, very, very informative, and we're so happy to have you here in sunny St. Lucia. Our final speaker is Mr. Christopher Hunt, marketing consultant here in St. Lucia. Mr. Hunt pursued business studies with a focus on marketing at Humber College of Applied Arts and Technology. Mr. Hunt has significantly contributed to St. Lucia's creative industries development in the public sector. He is recognized for his motivation, resilience, and analytical prowess. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Christopher Hunt.
First of all, that doesn't sound like me. At least those of you all who know me, for sure. Building democratic resilience against disinformation and misinformation. Ladies and gentlemen, it is hard to be sanguine on this topic, but if there's one thing that I have been forced to learn in this era of Cambridge Analytica and its role in misshaping Caribbean governance, it's this: psychology trumps logic. We all have it backwards, and forgive me if my presentation goes sideways compared to everybody else, but I'm just speaking from what I have experienced. Even those who consider that for themselves that they are formally educated, that they have some degree of immunity towards the psychology at play right now, they're wrong. In actual fact, the science suggests that you are even more susceptible as your mind works even quicker to assuage your mentality. In today's world, people no longer look for objectively verifiable information, or what we used to call facts, to make up their minds. Now people already have their biases, and they cherry pick their information, even subconsciously, to feed the narrative that they want to be true. Republicans watch Fox News, Democrats watch MSNBC. Right now, as we speak, Labour Party supporters are listening to Shelton Daniel, and UWP supporters are listening to Timothy Polio. You see, the science suggests that there's no way to prove that any of us are experiencing the exact same reality. We're all here, but whether it's through gender, our age, our life experiences, or whatever you have, there's no way for us to prove that even if I'm standing here and we're all together, that we have the exact same perception of reality. And that is important. And today, people are customizing their realities. Take Instagram, for example. If you like a Lamborghini, or you like Italy, or you like Burna Boy, right? You press like. The next day, you're going to get fed with pictures of a Lamborghini Murcielago, or you're going to get pictures of Positano in Italy. You're going to get pictures of Burna Boy performing, and you're going to get fed with those things. So we're now in that era, and that means that we are all living even more in our own realities. Social media has conflated our realities, not just augmenting our reality, they are bleeding into each other. So let's start with the difficult truth. Let's start with the difficult truth that there is no democracy online. So the entire premise of this forum doesn't apply once we get into social media. It's simple. It's like trying to stick a cloud into a box. That means that we have no choice but to adapt. So the rules that apply in life here now don't apply in social media. We'll go to dinner with our spouse or loved one. We will not bring a magazine and pull it out or a newspaper and read it at dinner. But you better believe somebody's going to hold their phone and check their phone. The fact of the matter is, anthropologists have concluded none of us can stay more than 3 hours without picking up our phone. We can't do it, right? Even if we're sick, we're still checking our phone. For the most part, we misuse social media as if we were misusing a lamppost, more for support than illumination. Social media is the addiction of our age, worse than tobacco because it actually does have benefits. And sorry folks, but 100 years from now, the image that will define us is this. We need to adapt to the fact that the rules that apply to society, like honesty and truth and credibility, don't apply in the alternate reality of social media, where what matters most is entertainment value. Good or bad are only as important as how viral something is. Just days ago, Republican candidate for president, former governor and Ambassador Nikki Haley spoke to legislation towards the full disclosure of algorithms by Facebook and TikTok and WhatsApp and everybody, and exposure of people's identities, so people could only have one identity, no more fake profiles. You know what happened? She had to walk it back. She literally had to apologize and come out with a whole bunch of stuff saying, no, you can still have all your ambiguity because people want that. The entire business model of social media platforms like TikTok and Facebook are psychological data driven. The only way they can get, or their revenue streams are from taking that data, figuring out how to weaponize it and sell it to the people that want. I mean, you look at TikTok, what they're feeding in the Caribbean, what they're feeding to the Western world is not what they're feeding to their people. Recognize that. So while you see people going with a little challenge and a dance and a little trendy thing, these people are looking at us and saying, oh, so we can make them make fools of themselves willfully. We need to come to terms with the fact that people like their fake profiles, where laws in reality don't apply. You can be anyone, change your name, your age, your ethnicity, your identity, and you can say and do all the things you would do if you were invisible in this society. The premise that we all want correct information is not true. There are a lot of people that want information that feels good to them. They choose to believe what they want to believe now because it's a convenient narrative that fits their personality dynamic. If you're an authoritarian lover and you love strong men, Trump can do no wrong. That's a simple example. We also have to come to terms with the fact that there are many people who get endorphins, the body's natural morphine, from getting likes. You put out a comment or post and somebody says they like that comment, they like that post, and depending on how many likes you get, you actually get a mood elevation. So it's not just a simple addiction like, oh, it's just something fashionable. And we need to come to terms with that. The fact of the matter is that many people do not want a reality check. Many people do not want a fact check. And the only way to move forward is the best defense, as I say every day, is a great offense. Get your information out first. Anchoring, and for those who may not know, although I suspect everybody does, anchoring is a simple example. You're selling your car for $100,000, you put the first anchor. The second person says that you're selling the car for they want to buy it for $30,000, that's the second anchor. The person who gets their message out first wins. It doesn't mean that you're going to be immune to disinformation. It just means at least you're taking, as we say in the local parlance, you're taking in front. That is half the battle right there. So in today's world, you either control the narrative or the narrative controls you. We need to appreciate the new media currencies are authenticity and popularity. An example of someone whose success is fueled by prioritizing not just entertainment, but also authenticity towards connection. You'll be surprised, but it's true. Taylor Swift. She has a following of 94 million people on Twitter/X. How does she do it? You think it's just her music? No, it's because of all those people that are connected to her. She actually takes hours in her day to try to send personal messages to all these people. Well, she'll die, she'll never get through to everybody, but she tries. She personalizes everything and predicates authenticity, lets you into her life at every level. It's a hell of a sacrifice, but the truth is that it works. So her impact on the US economy is actually $5.7 billion in each year that she runs her tour. That's enough to give every single American 20 US, and America is 300 million people. Authenticity is the answer. And you can be popular and authentic. It works. Disinformation and misinformation are not only here to stay, but evolve and devolve depending on your point of view, especially with the advent of AI. The answer, to my mind, is the development of a proactive culture that is not only resilient, but focuses on maintaining genuine connectivity with all echelons of society and a manifold of platforms, full stop. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your passion, Mr. Hunt. At this point in time, we would like to welcome questions from the audience. We have time for one or two questions. Any burning questions? This morning and this afternoon, coming into the afternoon, we have been given so much information, a lot to digest, a lot to think about. And as we go home today, we can continue this conversation with our colleagues, with our family members. But we would really like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists, the second panel. Thank you so much for the wealth of information that you shared. I don't know if you have any closing remarks or closing words for our audience members before you log off. All right. Thank you so much for that. Of course, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome the acting Prime Minister with the closing remarks for this afternoon. The Honorable Sean Edward.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I promise to be brief because there isn't much that can be added to the very insightful presentations we received here today. I did indicate when we started this morning that this session was very timely and its relevance should not be underestimated. And based on what we heard here this morning, I'm sure everybody will leave here with a greater appreciation for authentic information for decision making. The advances in technology will continue, and more persons will have access to the technology. This is one thing we cannot control, because science naturally will continue to evolve. But the one responsibility we have, and that is to teach our people to be responsible users of the technology. And in the realm of education, where I work as minister, the conversation is always ongoing. Do we ban cell phones and other smart devices in school, or do we regulate? I am for regulation and guidelines that would inform our children in terms of how they ought to use the technology. Today we live in a world where people have different objectives and motives. And I did indicate this morning that it is not only a firearm that can be a tool of destruction, but a smart device can inflict just as much damage, if not more, than a gun, a knife, or a cutlass. But we have to teach our people to be discerning. Because on every topic, be it in mainstream media or elsewhere, you have a range of opinions that will be imposed on our people. But how many are in a position to decipher what is fake and what is authentic? And as policymakers, as leaders in society, that responsibility is one that must be shared. And so today, on behalf of our Prime Minister, who's currently out of state, and the government of St. Lucia, I want to thank the Taiwanese ambassador and his team, the US ambassador and her team, and all the other agencies that collaborated to making this event the success that it has turned out to be. Thank you very much, and I'm hoping that at the end of today, we all will leave here a lot more informed and a lot more discerning, and we'll play our critical leadership roles in the various agencies and departments in making our people a lot more savvy and discerning as it relates to what they consume in mainstream media. Thank you very much.